Is it camera 1 or camera 2? Camera 1?
Camera 1.
Why do we have 2 cameras?
Camera 2.
We have dirt production.
Oh.
What production? Dirt production?
Dirt.
Well, we just finished work, so thanks for tuning in. We've got a lot of questions this time, and I don't know why Aaron always gets them printed out all real nice, and we don't.
Thank Miss Tracy for that.
We have our commentator. He is our retired
Air
strip
Force
club DJ, Genzilla. You guys can't see him. He's amazing.
I'm here. Yeah, I'm not good on the camera. People don't like to look at me.
Did they see you at the strip club, or did you have one of those booths where like
No, it
you
was
can't
really
see
dark. It was really dark. I was in the
If
corner.
if you're looking at the DJ at the strip club, you're at the wrong strip club.
Yes.
I know the customers think
you
we're
were looking at
laughing,
me
but
in
that's
the
where we
corner.
found Roy.
If you were looking at me in the corner, you were in the wrong strip club.
We were in Florida. We were in Florida after Bike Week, and we found Roy.
Yep.
Claremont.
Where's your tip jar, man?
It's the only hill in Florida is where
Yeah,
Roy lives.
yeah.
One sand hill.
It was the closest thing I could find. All right. So we have
Welcome
a
in.
bunch of questions tonight.
Okay.
And I figured I would kind of run through them and try to start off on the little stuff, and we can build in, because we end up covering a lot of these questions when we get into stuff anyways. And
For everybody that pressed 1 on the answering machine, appreciate it. There will be a charge from ClickBank in your account, but you
It's
pressed
okay.
it willingly, and we have that on.
It's going to a good cause.
Yes.
so we got a bunch of questions,
Yeah.
and all of them end up the same. A lot of them have to do with exhaust. You know, what exhaust do I, is good for this or good for that, and intakes as well. So I figure we touch on, because a lot of people say, well, what's the best intake for an M8? And I don't think that's a simple answer.
I think, I would use the one designed for the M8 because it's going to cause the least amount of air intake leaks.
Yes, instead of custom modifying something.
Or, the twin cam intakes, the Triumph intakes, none of those work very well.
Yeah.
The M8 intakes are definitely the ones I would pick.
One of the questions we had in here was, what do you see in air cleaners? Do you see a big difference in power between like a Roland Sands or an Amazon Special or, other types of air filters that people run? Do you see a big difference in something like that?
Well, not naming names.
Everybody wait for me.
Not naming names. There's one air cleaner in particular that cost us 5 horsepower and 5 foot-pounds, and we don't run that one anymore.
What was it?
No.
Yeah. So it was a big name brand.
Big name brand.
Heavy duty air filter.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
but-
by appearances, you'd think it would be great.
But now
it
a lot
costs
of that has to do with the motor it's on.
Sure.
What works really good on a 114 is not what's going to work really good on a 128 necessarily. And I think that's where, like I said, these questions are very specific. You almost have to call and talk to somebody, because your bike, your motor, whatever you have can change what your intake may be for performance. But
A lot of it is pretty basic. The intake design is pretty critical to your motorcycle design. So if you have like a Ultra with fairing lowers, then putting on a heavy breather is not necessarily going to be the best choice, because you're going to put a heavy breather that kind of is a pseudo ram air right behind a great big wall where your fairing lower is. So you're defeating the purpose that air cleaner was designed for. So if you have fairing lowers, you don't want to run that type of an intake, because you're just running it right into a air dam. So you're going to want to use more of a round style intake, and vice versa. If you don't have fairing lowers on a touring bike, running a ram air type heavy breather is a really good choice, because the air is going to be pushed right into it.
Yeah, I mean, the 2 most sold breathers we have on our builds would be the Ventilator Extreme, which, if you guys aren't familiar, the Ventilator is the oval shaped on the side. K&N from Harley, really nice. The Extreme takes the outside plate and turns it into a filter as well. So not only do you have the outside band a filter, but across the throttle body's a filter as well. And that's been a very good intake for the motors that we do. It's a nice quality. It's built by Harley, so it's tested. The heavy breather, they have the regular one, and now we have the Elite one that flows more air. When they came out of the 131, they came out of that setup. That guy is great as long as you don't run into the same situation Mike just explained. Our most sold intake that we do would be the Sns Stealth. The Sns Stealth is great. If you're adding heads, big cam, they have a 1-inch larger filter that gives you more air volume. That's really, really nice on them. They have different covers. They take stock covers. I would say the two most that we run through the shop that we haven't seen sacrifice power would be an Sns Stealth with the 1-inch larger, or even the Sns Stealth by itself, or the ventilator with the extreme cover.
Yeah.
I mean,
And the SNS Stealth is an awesome price point too, on top
Yeah.
of it. So you're not spending $700 to get a top quality component.
And so people understand we have done other air filters of almost all kinds.
Oh yeah.
And almost always after we get in there and see it run, it goes to one of the air cleaners that you're talking about.
Well, or that style.
Yeah. Something similar.
Because, you know, there's a lot of different companies that make the same type of thing with their little flare. Or, you know, a lot of people prefer like an RSD because they really like the design of it or whatever. I mean, that's not that big of a deal. There's just certain design styles that you want to stay away from, and, you know, that's a whole show all by itself.
Yeah.
well, the evac system that takes the oil from the heads, you know, some of the intakes that we see that are pretty and fancy, that system's not as good as some of the other ones. And I feel like when you get on and off the throttle, it's actually sucking more through the intake on some air cleaners than others.
Correct.
I mean,
And
I've been behind guys where every time they get off and on the throttle, it's like a puff of smoke out the back because it's just sucking so much oil the way they've designed that to work.
Correct.
And, you know, a lot of you guys out there, we've seen it where your filters are just soaked on the bottom as well. So some companies do a better job of that than
Well,
others.
and they, you know, we had a question about the Amazon and the eBay specials. This is one of the areas that they are usually the worst at in taking the breather oil out and letting the heads breathe because they're just very cheaply made, you know. I know fitment and the breathability of the products is not nearly as good, you know, as the even, you know, the aftermarket that's name brand.
Well, the best bang for the buck is that Sns Stealth. It'll work with just an air cleaner, mufflers, you can put a tuner on it, and it will start from that small of a package, and you can build on it with a motor, and then it has the 1-inch filter that you can get later down the road where you can run 150 plus horsepower on it. So that setup is good for the now and the later.
And there's SNS has done a really good job with, there's several different cover options. You can run an adapter to run your stock cover. There are, and I don't know, 15 or 20 of the little
carbon
the silver,
teardrops.
the round medallion, you know. They've got the teardrops, carbon fiber. Now they have the new one. I can't remember what the new one's called. That's more like an extreme with the filter in the center.
with the
the Elite or something like that they just came out with.
Yep, that's cool.
Yeah,
just sold
so
one today actually.
there's a lot of different styles you can go with that air cleaner, so it's real versatile. All right, well, it's been nice. We appreciate it.
So, you know, on the same note there, we get a lot of questions on, you know, the exhaust, the headers, you know.
Hey, hold
how
on. Somebody
does,
said help me.
how does, you know, the
Yeah.
full sack,
There's a live chat going too?
Yeah.
I want to run in the Hogs Gone
Oh,
Wild
nice.
race and need 200 horsepower and 200 torque. Can you help me? Yes.
Yes, we
Lots
can.
of money. We got it.
Call,
You wanna-
call the number right here. Is that happening?
yeah.
Or is that not happening today?
You want a 143 or 150 cubic inch? What do you want? We got
Who
either
is that?
or.
Madison Williams? Malcolm Williams?
Malcolm.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have
Call
two
me
of those.
Malcolm.
No, we have two of those going through the shop right now, though.
Yeah.
We have our shop bike, which is 147 cubic inch design, and then we have 143 cubic inch that should be, you know, that as well, depending on what cam we do with Lizama's build. I mean, that's every bit of 200, or at least 200 horse, close to that in torque.
Yeah.
All right.
I can't see
So
that.
sorry. Continue
Yeah.
your question.
Move on. Sorry.
So
Just saw help
Dreaming
me
about
and had to-
horsepower.
All caps.
Yeah.
You can't read anything. 'cause
you
it's so
know,
old.
sticking with the basics, if you will. We get a lot of questions in here on exhaust as well. Like, what else aside from the major ones that we really like, which is only a couple because we've done so many that we know what we like. How do they compare? How do the others compare to it, and why not go with like a jackpot or jackpot's usually right there. It's not too bad. Or how do the full sacks compare and stuff like that.
Malcolm says he has money. Lots of money. Just money signs all over that computer. Jimmy, we love you. You can see it. Well, you're in Texas. That's a real state. Love it. 150. Yeah, let's do it.
And on top of that, just talk about that for a minute. Like, if you have a Milwaukee 8 motor, what exhaust should you be running, and are there others that are comparable that are almost perform just as well?
In a 2-in-1 and a 2?
Well, there's a lot of really good exhausts out there.
Yeah.
I mean, some of it's preference. You kind of run when you find combinations that work, you tend to stick with them because why not? We do run a lot of D&Ds because they are very, very good performing exhaust, and it's
Very
a
well
good
made.
price point. They're well made. They're made in Texas.
Yeah.
We try to stick with the USA made products whenever we can, because why would we buy stuff made in China?
Well, there's different things we see. There's 2-in-1s, a 2-in-2. I see someone's requesting a 2-in-2 right now too. So there's multiple different things. One is the right exhaust size for the motor. Shoot, we had a situation just yesterday where we built a pretty high compression motor for the street, and the exhaust wouldn't handle it. The customer wanted to keep it, and we had to talk to him and get him the right exhaust to flow. Do you want to talk about some 2-in-2s that you run that we've had success with and that we like?
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to run 124, 128 inch, either with or without heads, run our Pro Stock header. That's a great header.
That's why he's on this panel.
That header is very well made. It's all stainless steel. Burns makes it for us. Super, super nice finish on it. You can run it with or without heat shields. I'd love to see one without heat shields on it.
It's coming up.
Polished up. That would be awesome to see. But no, really good pipe. One of the reasons it works as well as it does is on these larger displacement motors, especially when you've got heads and big throttle bodies and stuff like that. The primary diameter has been increased from 1 3/4 to
You
1
grab one?
7/8. And it will keep up with the flow that you're going to get with those bigger components on the top end. And it runs great. It curves out good, sounds amazing. And we haven't seen the full potential of that thing yet. We can just keep putting it on bigger and bigger and see where we end up.
And that's why we don't run any other ones.
So how small can I go with that?
I would not put that on anything under 124 or 128 cubic inches at 11-to-1.
So if I'm
I
rocking
would.
a
I would.
I would.
Would you?
Well, if it's a headed, like we're building
Like a high comp 117?
a 114 with some nice CNC heads all day. That's kind of where I draw a line. A 114 with stock heads, no. But if you have a 114 or a 117 with CNC heads, regardless
got
if
the
they're
flow, yeah.
if they're ours or Harleys, they'll do it. The difference
Well,
of that guy is
And you could run it with our muffler, because one of the nice things that we've done with our muffler from Chromeworks is we have different baffle setups that can do it. We did it first, by the way, the different baffle setups for the mufflers. And you could run a heavier baffled muffler with that bigger head pipe, especially if you're going to do the exhaust now and you're going to do a build later, and you're going to do a stage 1 in the beginning. We could set it up to where the only thing that you needed to replace later would be the muffler,
One little baffle.
the baffle inside the muffler.
And a tune.
We were first.
so
or no baffle.
I have a fairly specific question on exhaust here. So while we're talking about it, it says, my question is, the fueling AR exhaust, does it provide good and low mid-range torque throughout the curve? Also, is there an advantage of going with a 4-step primary over a 3-step primary on this AR exhaust? My build is a Dark Horse 128 stroker, Moonshine heads, 592 cam, trying to decide which fueling AR exhaust I should go with.
No reason for a four-step.
Four-step.
We can make that whatever size we want. I would say to call me or Aaron. We'll go over it because not only do we have options to step the front of the header, the primary, we have options for different steps in the muffler.
The collector size,
Y-
yeah.
You know, so there's 2 different collector sizes. It's a 3-step muffler as well, and there's a 2-step muffler as well. So we build it in all different sizes. We built that setup, and we've had Feeling do it for us with primaries that end in 2 1/8 inch, where they go all the way. They step from the 1 7/8 all the way to 2 1/8 into the collector. I mean,
Some shenanigans going on the internet right now.
What we got going on?
Oh, are you watching the chat?
Yeah.
Yellow submarine.
is that Jacob? Oh, and I forgot, Roy isn't a retired strip club DJ. He was out of work because of COVID. Strip club DJ. I just gotta fix
Well,
that
no,
little
wait a
mishap.
minute.
He's still working.
Strip clubs are essential.
Drive through.
Hey, Jacob, shove it.
So I have a
It's Friday,
question here.
buddy. You forgot.
What's the difference between the SNS 124 128 kit and the Moonshine 124 128 kit?
Oh, go for it.
Well, when you buy SNSs, they package it with their cam
And valve springs.
and valve springs. So it's going to come with a 550 cam and valve springs. And we don't run that 550 cam unless we have a ported head on there. With stock heads, it just doesn't do everything we want it to do. So to run that system and get the best results is to pair it with a head. And it's a great cam with a really nice pair of heads. So if you're running that on stock heads, that's not the kit for you. Our kit is kind of a la carte, where if we want to buy the gas ported rings we now carry from Total Seal, we could throw those in the kit. It doesn't come with valve springs. That way, if we run a cam that doesn't require the valve springs, like let's say a 475, a 472, a 468, someone wants a stump puller, we can pair that cam in the kit. And our kit's just more buildable on different stuff. And we have different options for pistons too. You know, we have some pistons that are the normal compression ratio that SNS has, and then we have the options in our kits to sub those out for different pistons. So it's just more maneuverable instead of just done one way.
Yeah. Ooh, pretty.
Well, and that also makes it more cost effective because
Yeah.
Can you zoom in on this guy? Do I gotta get closer? I gotta get up? This guy right here, if you look at this transition, there's nothing in there, and how smooth it is, it doesn't block your port from your head. We see so many exhausts when you have a nice ported head and you put the exhaust up, it's actually blocking flow. So this guy's a little bit more money. That's a CNC piece from Burns that they do. It's done very, very nice.
There's also some AR stuff going on in the back here.
Yeah, their X chamber, they patent this the way they have theirs. It's a very, very nicely done piece. Really good, thick stainless steel. And we've moved this X chamber back as far as we can move it. I mean, if you look, it's into the turn. And the farther we move this, the better your torque curve is typically.
Longer primary.
Yep. And there's other pipes out on the market just like it. These are about a couple dollars under $1,200. But it's a very nice piece, and the pieces on it are more money, which makes it a higher dollar system. But if you want to run a 2 into 2 with an X chamber, there's not really anything on the market that's better than this
Not
right
gonna
now.
touch that.
Is
No.
there?
Not at all.
No.
Not even close. And it's got a cool logo on it.
Move
And
it
I
on the
think
table.
Zippers putting that to the test for us.
They are.
Aren't they? Don't we have like a $1 bet that
That's
they
gonna
could find
fall.
a better flowing X pipe than this?
Well, he said you didn't have to test it. He goes, I just looked at it. You're good.
I
Dan,
still.
Dan, you watching?
Yeah.
Thanks for coming to see us.
You're
the
gonna
other
owe me
week.
$1, Dan.
Let's see here. On the same kind of note there, you know, I had a few questions about the vented, you know, the fueling vented dipsticks and the other brands. Obviously, there's more than just Fueling is making them. And you know, what do you think about them? When do you need them? When don't you need them?
Well, it's never gonna hurt to have one.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing.
You know, so if you feel that it's a necessity for your motorcycle, then go ahead and get one. I personally really like the Fueling one. The engineering that went into that is really rock solid. You can run it with a cap or the tube. They have a dipstick on it, which most of the other ones don't. So with the other ones, if you want to check your oil level, you have to carry your dipstick around with you anyway. and then you have to unscrew that one, put your dipstick in. I mean, why? Fuelings has got your oil level right on it. It's a really top-notch product.
Yeah, and plus it's got a quick disconnect from the tube, right?
Yeah, when
Yes.
you do,
So-
when you do take it off.
You get the hose out of the way so you can take it off like a normal dipstick. Some of the other ones, that doesn't come off. So you're trying to unscrew it while this hose is on there and it's binding
some
up.
ties.
And then when you put it in, you kind of like have to wrap it back up, right? To unwind it to get it back in there. So
And the hose is real small and it's real discreet. It's a really good product. If you're gonna run one, that's the one I would run.
that is the best one that we've seen.
Yes.
Absolutely, hands down. Buy it.
So, you get a lot of questions on what cam should I run in a specific bike, and I think we touch on this a lot, that this is so rider specific.
Absolutely.
It's not, and I think this is maybe what we push and why people like talking to us, because you can't just necessarily open up a catalog and look at stuff and say that's what's right for me. So, run through, if I say I can't afford a 124 or 128, I've got a 107 114 stock bike, and I want more pep. I want to get a stage 2 a cam exhaust intake. We kind of talked about what exhaust, what intake to run. What are the cams that really just stand out in the crowd for those basically stock bikes, true stage 2 bikes?
Stage 2, 114.
Yeah.
Well, both, because there's a lot of people riding around on 107s that
like-
they want to know.
if you
Let's
just-
start with the 107
If you're
because
just
the
gonna do a
107's
cam
out
and,
there.
and either one of those bikes and not much else, I would probably, the 3 I would go with would be probably the SNS 465, the
Fueling
465, or the Redshift 468.
468. Yep. Those are the go-tos.
All 3 of those are really, really good
Phenomenal.
cams.
If you have a 117, 2 cams are really close to each other on those 2 bikes. If it's a stock CVO,
472.
would be the 472 from Fueling and then the 22XE from Wood. I
Yeah.
mean, those 2 cams, both of those cams are so close. I mean, if you didn't know which one was in the bike and you saw the dyno, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart. I mean, they're both great cams on that 117.
And what about the 465, 468s? What really sets those apart from each other? Why recommend one over the other? Or?
The
Well,
shape of the curve.
The SNS 465 is a really good low end torque cam. I mean, with a 107, you can pull the front wheel off the ground with a SNS 465 in it. The Fueling 465 is more of a mid-range to top end cam, and the 468 by Zippers, the Redshift, is kind of right in between the 2 of them. It's got good low end, it's got good top end, but it's more of a little bit of a centered RPM range cam than the other 2.
So if you ride hot on the weekends, but a little lighter on the the weekday, but you really get up in the RPMs, you may want to lean towards a 468 or something like that. If you're just riding with your friends and your wife and you don't ever bounce it off the rev limiter, maybe sticking in the 465 range,
Yeah, the
maybe
SNS
more,
465,
maybe more your.
Yeah.
Especially like a heavy touring bike with 2 up, going up hills and just pleasure riding on back roads. The SNS 465 is awesome for that.
Yeah, 2 up riding in town, 465, half and half. You're going to go to that 468, and then ripping all the time by yourself. We're going to push the 465 Fueling, or that 472 possibly, if you're up there in the motor. You're
But
really ripping highway.
In any cam that you pick, just make sure that you're pairing it with the right exhaust, because you can undo the direction that you're trying to go in really quickly with a bad pipe choice.
And that exhaust is the Moonshine.
Yeah,
Well, a couple of guys, I had
sound,
questions
thrash
that I
is
saw on the exhaust, and it was the 2 brothers. If you want something that rips from 3,300 all the way to 6,500, the 2 brothers is fine. But in town riding, on the bottom, that pipe is going to suffer a lot. It's real short. The way it merges there in that collector and they dump into each other isn't the best way to do it. It is a cost-effective exhaust. If you like the short look, awesome.
Sounds great.
It's going to be loud, but you're going to give up a lot of bottom. So if you're trying to build a bottom end setup for in town, that's not the exhaust we'd pair. Now, if you're doing something where you're ripping, you're racing all the time, and you want exhaust that's short and it's good on the budget, great pipe for that. There are some better pipes out there. Burns probably makes the best shorty pipe for racing.
And I
depending on
think
the setup.
something scrolled up about Softail exhaust too. I think a couple people on the little chat have asked about Softail exhaust. So
Take
yes, it is required.
You gotta have one.
You don't
But
want
even
to
a
hear it
soft tail-
without
I
it.
know these guys watching think it's funny, but we got to deal with this like every 30 minutes. You know?
To answer your question, yes, use exhaust on the Softail.
Is that bike can be done? It'll be done when it's done.
Right.
Oh, thanks, Mike.
No, you know, the Softails the rules are the same no matter what. You have a little bit of a different platform. You can't really get the length of exhaust typically on a Softail, you know, because of the way the platforms are built. The same with, you know, Sportsters and some of the smaller bikes. So you're typically going to have a little bit softer bottom end on a bike like that, no matter what you try to do, which is fine because
Lighter.
the bikes are lighter, so you tend to ride in a higher RPM range anyway, and just from the way they're designed. But a good 2-into-1, you know, we use a lot of Trask for those. Bassani makes a good 2-into-1 Softail pipe. Thrashin makes
Thrashin.
good pipes. You know, we run a lot of the Thrashin AR pipes, and they also make a big cubic inch pipe for us. And if you want to do the 2-into-2, then I would probably just leave your stock head pipes and just get some really good high flowing mufflers. SNS makes some great ones. Actually, Harley now makes a high flowing 2-into-1 system that has high flow cats, especially if you're in one of those areas that requires catalysts. They just came out this year. It's a pretty good looking exhaust. It actually almost looks like a Rakopovic.
25% lighter.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen it yet in
Yeah.
the catalog, but
25% lighter as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it is a very good looking exhaust. So,
Well, 540. If we put a 540 in the SNS 131 or a Harley 131 yet?
No, we've run it in a 128.
The 540 cam question just popped up. Great
Torquey
torque.
cam.
It's a torque
Torquey
monster.
Yeah.
A cam good for either one of those setups. So a 131,
Yeah.
Harley,
run with no heads.
the 540. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're running heads, we would move up to like a 538, maybe a 592. One of our cams are a little bigger cam. And we're still going through cams for all these guys asking. Right now, we had a high compression motor of a Star Racing cam in it. We just ran that, got the data, and we're about to stick a Ward cam in there. I mean, we're still testing cams. There's still cams coming out to market, and there's going to be cool combinations that you guys are going to see hit. Question about the SNS cams we just saw. Those are two brand new cams they brought out. They brought out the 540, and they brought out a 590.
Yeah.
So those are new. All the manufacturers that are working out there, Wood, Feeling, Zippers, Ward, Star, all those guys will have more cams hit market soon as well. We will as well. So more to come from everyone. The M8 platform has been very good. The 131 setup from Harley is awesome. You can buy that motor and just swap out the cam, and they make great power.
So you're kind of saying the best is yet to come.
The best is yet to come.
so
Where have I heard that before?
I get a lot of questions about injectors as well.
Yeah.
When do you have to change your injectors, and when is it right to start doing an intake? Say, your intake seal. At what part of the build are you getting into the 124, 128 range? Does that require a larger intake and larger injectors, or does it depend on the build?
I would say injectors for sure if you're going to do a 124, 128. You could get by with a stock intake and you're still going to make pretty good power. But I would at least go to a 5.5 injector. We run 6.2. We just kind of skip over the 5.5s and just go from the stock 4.38 to a 6.2. Then when we get into our real big, when you're
Heads.
breaking over 150 horsepower, 160 horsepower, you're going to want to go into like the 7-8 gram range. But the 6.2s will run pretty much anything that's under 150 horsepower pretty easy.
Well, I guess somebody asked here, Zippers in one of their horsepower graphs recommends that a 5.5 is good to about 130, 140 horsepower, but they recommend a 7.1 injector. What are the benefits of running a larger injector than maybe what you need?
Well, running a larger injector than what you need, there is no benefit to that.
None.
Well, it depends how you're riding the bike. When you pick a cam and intake, injector's the same way. You don't want injectors just blasting fuel in there. You want something that responds well under 3/4 throttle. Large injectors don't do as well with less throttle. They're better at wide open throttle compared to
The whole
smaller.
job of the
So
injector is to atomize it. So if you're spraying something and you're just parking a whole bunch of fuel in the back of the valve, it falls out of suspension and you lose the effectiveness of the ejector.
If your
So-
dwell time is too small, it
Yes,
doesn't have time
so
to atomize.
The key to the whole situation is enough to deal with the demand without too much, so you're parking fuel in the back of the valve and you know, basically de-atomizing the fuel or not atomizing it properly, right?
Okay.
yeah,
Spark plugs.
if you have a good tuner too, he's going to know if your injector's out. I mean, it's not like you pick an injector and you don't know. He'll be like, hey, these things are maxed out 100%, and
Yeah.
I made it $5,000.
So
you know.
when you say max out of 100%,
they
you're
have
talking about the dwell time, how much
Yeah,
time
the
it's
duty
open.
cycle.
Duty
Yeah.
cycle,
Duty
or the
cycle.
dwell time, correct. And you don't want to really operate over the 80% range if you can help it.
Yeah, and you
because
don't want to
you're
go
running long
under
term.
like 30%.
Correct. Yeah, there's a bottom and there's a top. So you
Yeah.
can go too big with an injector, but going a little bit big and not going too big can release lower your dwell time and
Yeah.
take a little bit of the stress out of those injectors. If you're running in the 80% range or above, you need to put bigger injectors.
We're typically anything without heads, we're 6'1", 6'2". If we have heads, we're stepping up to a 7 and over. We're not getting into anything into the 8s until it's a big,
Big, nasty.
late closing cam, 160 horse plus. Or real large cubic inch, like the motors we talked about earlier when we started, 143 to 150 cubic inch setups.
How big can you go with the stock intake?
The throttle body or the manifold?
Throttle body, manifold, everything. Oh, so you could do the larger backing. So
Yeah.
with the, what is it,
55
millimeter.
Well,
how,
I mean,
how much does that support? How big of a motor?
I think if you did, like a drop-in 124 or 128 kit, you'd be okay. You're not going to be able to maybe make the amount of peak horsepower that is possible, but you're only going to leave a few on the table.
You're still going to make a lot more than you had.
Yeah, you're still
Yeah.
going to have a ripping bike.
Yeah.
But I mean, the intake manifold is a couple $189.
$189.
If you upgrade it, it always makes more power. Always makes more power.
Yeah. What about spark plugs?
Yes, they are a requirement.
Are there any better? So the question I have is, are there any better than the Screaming Eagle spark plug? What plugs do we run?
We usually run the Screaming Eagle ones just because the heat range is designed for the motor. There's a lot of spark plugs you can run out there as long as you run them in the right heat range for what you're trying to do.
Well, we're about to start trying those new spark plugs.
Yes.
Mike has a side project that he's going to get to tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Yeah, I bet.
They're hard to
What
get.
were the plugs called? What were they? How'd they work?
Top
Sparked,
secret
sparked,
plugs.
sparked all over.
Yeah. Sparks.
It threw out like 90
Sparkiest
sparks. Or something. I
plugs.
don't even know. He was showing me a thing. It threw out like 90 sparks.
Yeah. I can't remember.
One plug.
Yeah. We're getting set up with
Victor says he's ready to go from a 131 to a 135. He has money.
It takes a little bit. The 135s will be ready to rock and roll here in about 2 to 3 weeks. So pistons will be here, new cylinders will be here. Those cylinders they've taken us a little while, but we put them in a case deeper than anything else on the market so far. We've even notched them around the oil squirter. So real cool setup, thick cylinder wall, because we wanted to be able to handle horsepower, and we wanted you to be able to handle a lot of heat in case you were running this thing in traffic and you were going somewhere, a bike night, and you had to sit out a light or two. Super cool kit. We didn't go any bigger than that for street just because they started to make a lot of heat. These 143s, 150, you're at the border there where, that's a setup where it's more weekend.
So on the same note, kind of on the budget build note, what's the necessity in the cam plate area? Is it a necessity to replace the cam plate if I'm throwing cams? I'm doing a stage 2 exhaust. I'm trying to do it, budget. Is it a necessity to do a cam plate, an oil pump for that?
It's
matter?
not a necessity. I mean, the oil system and the cam plate setup that Harley has designed is adequate. We just do it because why not have, well, you're already there. There's no cheaper time to do it than while you're already paying to do it, to be in the area.
It doesn't cost any extra.
Yeah, because,
Just the
when you
part.
pay for that cam job, when you go back and decide, you know what, I think I want to upgrade my oil pump, you're paying for it again. So it's not a necessity, but while you're already there, it's the cheapest it's ever going to be. And it's definitely not a bad idea.
There are improvements too on those plates as well, right? With volume and pressure.
On rigidity and
Yeah, there's all those things.
the oiling system, you know, they don't, when you look at these billet plates and oil pumps, they aren't designing them to be cost effective to be put in 50,000 units every year. They're designing them to be the best performing units that they can engineer. So they aren't cost productive on a stock motor, but they are cost productive when you're already paying the money to upgrade that motor to something bigger.
Yeah, and then something we like is a lot of customers ask us what plate, which one would you run, you know, red, blue. We pick blue for one reason. Typically, we run everyone's plate, and customers are diehard on their brand, right? But the SNS one, there's a benefit because there's 2 screens in that
And a magnet.
setup,
And 2
and 2 magnets. So let's say you did have a lifter that wasn't made up to as good a quality as all the other lifters in your motor, and it failed early. That SNS setup,
We've seen it.
Seen it
I mean,
save
it
motors.
is saved a ton. Instead of having to rebuild everything and start all over, it limits it to the crank, or I mean, to the cam chest area.
Yeah. And we've seen pretty catastrophic failures where the safeguards that SNS has put in place on their oil pump stop the metal from going through the pump.
Yes, we have.
So if you're going to high mileage something and you're a rider,
Yes.
that's the plate we'd recommend.
Now, I've not seen a failure on a motorcycle that had a fueling pump, so I don't know how well, but
Yeah.
we've had.
Not to say that one had
and to
anything
be
to do
said,
with the other, but
it wasn't the plate
It
in the
had
pump
nothing
that
to do with
failed.
that.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
it was-
yeah.
One was an intercam bearing and one was a lifter. You know, they had nothing to do with the pump and plate that was installed, but both of them happened to have SNS oil pumps and plates in them, and the oil pump and plate saved the entire motor,
Yeah.
other than the parts that failed.
Yeah, so. I'm doing it myself. We'll say, how do you break in an engine? This is an interesting question because you get a lot of different answers depending on who you ask. So, if you're building it yourself and you don't know, because if somebody is building it for you, then they should know how to break it in.
I would follow
say.
the break-in instructions of whoever supplied the parts.
Okay.
You have a personal strategy?
Yep. I follow the break-in instructions of whoever supplied the parts.
Yeah.
Right. If you get an SNS kit, right in that kit, it's going to give break-in procedures. If you get a Zippers big bore kit, right in that kit, it's going to have break-in procedures. Almost every company that makes kits that you can install yourself, they will have some sort of a break-in procedure that they recommend, and that's the one that I would go with.
Yep.
Because if I build your engine, I'm going to warranty the engine. If you build your engine, I'm not going to warranty the engine.
We just had a question come across over here on the live chat, which was, what's the highest compression you guys do on the street? That's something me and Mike have been playing with. We've been steadily.
That was actually going to be part of my next question here, because people are asking about pop-up pistons, dome pistons, flat-top pistons, things like that. Like, what are the differences? And I had another question that actually asked about how the cam profile can affect calculated compression ratio, and how all that affects each other. You know, between head gasket, the style of piston, and cam. You know, how do those affect each other on compression?
Well, that was a conversation me and Mike were having yesterday, because we're coming out with higher compression setups on pretty much all these motors from these bigger cams. And we're starting to see that, a static compression ratio, listed static, and a lot of people don't understand, you have a static compression, which is when you don't take in the valve timing, you just take in what's in the cylinder, max it out, and compress it, okay? So we're starting to test stuff that's like 12.2 to about 12.4 static. And the reason we can go so high is because some cams are going to close later. Most of these cams you're running on the SNS setup or Harley setup, a late close on one of those cams is like a 37, a 38. You know, somewhere around there is kind of a late close for those lower compression 11-to-1 static motors. Getting up to this 12 to 12.4, 12.3 static, you know, we're now able to run an intake close on the cam of 42, 44, 48, and above. I mean, shoot, Wood's got a cam that closes at 52.
Yeah.
A big boy.
Yeah, and so does
Even
comp
more.
cams.
Yeah,
You
so
can't put that in a regular engine. It
Fall on its face.
yeah, it just won't be able to run.
yeah, and what happens is both of those motors, before you get to the cam, with your piston and your volume in your chamber, they can, let's just use an easy number, 12-to-1. One cam will make it where it's like 11-to-1, another cam will make it where it's like 10-8-to-1. Corrected compression, because your intake valve is open longer, so when it starts to come back up, you lose some air. You're not getting as much air in the volume of the cylinder compressed. So for static, we're seeing 12-to-1 to 12.35-to-1 is kind of where we're playing right now, and we're kind of pushing the limits on that stuff and trying to see what we can do, and we're rolling it out. So our 135 setup's the same way. We have a new piston for that Sns stroker flywheel. It's got some compression for these bigger cams and higher horse, and I'm beating on Mike to test them every day. So just like we've been testing the cam shootouts years ago, we're going to have a piston shootout that we've designed with some bigger cams. And
all pump gas.
All pump
All
gas.
pump gas. This is no race gas stuff. I mean, clearly you could be quite a bit more aggressive if we were to go to race gas, but all this stuff's happening on pump gas.
Well,
So would you say everything happens on pump gas?
No, the real party starts on race gas.
I talked to Georgia Star Racing, and he's like, who doesn't have race gas in their bike? I thought everyone has in their bike.
You mean you run pump gas?
You mean you go to the
George's like,
station?
I build winners.
Sucker.
You mean you go to Shell?
Shell is probably the best gas you can get. Though.
I got an interesting question here. If installing an SNS cam chest kit, how important is it to install the new oil seal on the back of the oil pump?
Well, there's a slot for it.
I think that's back to the dipstick. Do it. It's there. If you're already going to be putting it in, let's do it. It's an extra precaution. They didn't put that there for no reason.
Yeah, a bunch of well-paid engineers decided that it needed to be there.
Well, Harley's smart. I mean, there's a reason that they took that extra step in the
Machining
process. That costs money. I mean, if they didn't have to do it, they wouldn't have added that there. So there's a benefit to it. We don't want to go into too much detail, but yeah, if you have it, buy the extra steel. We don't use the old one. We put a brand new one in when we do it. If we don't have a steel on the work order, Mike gets mad. He starts yelling. Calls people names.
So
A beat up sketch.
I had a few people asking about roller rockers. And when should you use
They're
roller
on back order.
rockers?
They're, if you can get them,
They're on back order.
If you can get them,
You
call
should
me.
use them when you can buy them.
I get about 4 sets of them.
And it's
right now. I have
it's
coming
gonna
my
be a
way.
while, because as soon as they're on back order, we're buying them all.
We already did. I think 200 sets. So if they're on back order, it's
Yeah.
because we probably have them.
Yeah, if you can't get clutch baskets, sorry,
We installed a pair a day.
Yeah, we have all of them.
we have all of them.
Thanks, Travis.
Yeah. But I mean, a roller, there's 2 advantages to the roller.
Are they worth the $525 price was one of the questions here.
It depends what your goals are. You know, I mean, if you're on a high lift cam and the tip is wanting to move because you've got such an aggressive lift on the cam and you can control how much fiddling with the tip of the valve. The roller will stop scuffing on the tip, stop it from wanting to pull the tip of the valve over. A little bit less resistance there, obviously, but also the SNS is a 1/6/4 ratio as opposed to a 1/6/0.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for a little bit more lift at the seat with the same cam, drop that in.
What does that mean for maybe people that don't understand? How does that work?
Okay, so the ratio between the short end of the rocker and the long end of the rocker, the 1/6/0 is here, a 1/6/4 is going to be a little bit longer. So when this end tips up and this comes down, you're going to get more action at the valve at the seat than you would if you were using
And now there's some
rocker.
precautions that you
Yeah.
need to take.
And
in
if
that.
you want more information on that, Aaron isn't doing anything all day tomorrow. So go ahead and call at 9 a.m.
Phone is welded to
Well,
my
the
ear, man.
amount of change from stock to where that is so minute. It's not much. I mean, it's a very small change that they put in there. So If you're going over if you're 550 or over and you have the budget for it and they're available, do them. That's where I'm at with them. They're more rigid. It throws the oil more into the valve spring. You know, we've talked about it multiple times. They did that just because they were designing it. Why not? It doesn't have to be in there, but it is a stronger setup. It does roll smoother on the tip of the valve. 550 on up is where you want to see. If you're below a 550 lift cam, I would stick with the standard one. That's where I would be.
Okay. Talk about warranty. I get a bunch of questions about warranty. You know, I have a year left. I have 2 years left, whatever it is. If I put a cam, a non-Harley cam, and a Power Vision tuner, does that void my warranty?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it does.
It's a very quick answer for that.
Yeah.
Unless we build your motor.
And
then we
that was
warranty it.
that was
We'll
the
honor
next
that
part
warranty.
was if I have 1 year left on my Harley and get a Moonshine build, will Moonshine
That'll
Harley
belly just the
warranty
tip.
the motor for
Yeah.
the rest of
The rest of your factory warranty.
the factory warranty? Yes.
And if you want to buy a warranty to protect your setup that you already have that's no longer covered by Harley, you can buy our warranty. Our warranty will piggyback on top of Harley's warranty. So if they say no, we'll cover it for you. So if you have some builds already in your bike and you want coverage, you can call us, get a hold of Aaron. He can take care of that for you. So we have a setup to go.
It's good. 50 states, 0 deductible.
Any Harley Davidson dealership in the country. They might not have seen it when you roll in with it and need to use it. You call the 1-800 number, you get a hold of our team, we'll take care of it for you.
Yep.
And no restrictions on parts. Anything you want to put on.
Yeah. Did anyone question RDRS?
You can't question RDRS.
So you have this really pretty crankshaft in front of you,
Is that one of
and
the,
I had
is that one of
flywheel.
those pre-written questions?
Yeah, well, it kind of is. Can you explain the difference between like tapered rods and full width rods, and you know the difference in something like that, and what's in the bike from stock?
Mike, you like the rods of power?
Well,
So you-
I mean, the
rods
biggest thing with tapered rods versus like these solid rods is it gives you a little bit of weight savings on the reciprocating end, and if you run full block pistons that are designed for that style of a rod, you can't run them with a straight rod. That's all. I mean, there's no real like they run tapered rods because of this versus, you know, a lot of the tapered rods are they don't have bushings, so it's a single piece. But that is just mainly,
Fitment concern, right?
yeah, and you're gonna maybe save a couple of grams on the reciprocating end. So
And the tapered rods, the reason they're tapered is so that you can run a longer skirt on the piston, and your angle, if you were to hold it up when it's coming down and around the piston, it doesn't hit the bottom of it.
No, the tapered of the rod is the top portion.
yeah,
So
it's
this
just
is full width. Tapered is narrower
shaped like this.
Okay.
in the center here.
I thought we had.
So what you do is you lose the side weights off of here, and instead of it being steel, you have aluminum because the piston takes up that weight in the piston. So your piston has to be designed for it.
And that's the stock rods are
Yeah.
tapered.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
And so
there are
that just has a
pistons-
little more beef up there, just a little more keeping it from rocking, I guess, back and forth, or.
It's mainly just a little bit of a weight design, and
Okay.
there are pistons that are designed to run on a tapered. They're called a full block piston. They're designed to run on a tapered rod.
And what
But-
about those nice big holes cut in the side of it?
Those are custom.
That is
with
full
a
custom
K.
right there.
With a
Yes.
K. Well, it depends on what you're running. You know, I like the lighter flywheel because I'm on and off my throttle a lot. And when you're getting on and off of it, the bike comes down faster, it wakes up quicker. If you're a drag racing guy and you're at the track, you don't want to run this setup. If you're at the track running, you want a heavy flywheel. And if you have a motor designed for racing, you're going to leave this guy heavy because the weight closer to the center is better. And what happens is when you hit the next shift, it hits harder every single shift. And a lot of these drag racers, they're going to 7,000 RPMs. They shift at 7, the bike falls back to 5, back up to 7. They stay between 5 and 7 the whole way. That's where those high compression motors come in.
Just
And
get all that
I was
weight
talking to
moving.
George, and he was the one that explained that to me because I've always been lighter. This is an S&S flywheel halves. They come heavier than a stock Harley flywheel. So even after we cut the holes in the side, and you know, we use multiple companies. This one's done by Dark Horse. They do a really good job, and they do a majority of the stuff that we do. But even after all this is done, we're back to the weight of a stock flywheel. It's not like this one's a lot lighter than a flywheel. This one's stronger. It's a new flywheel from SNS with new shafts on it, but this is the same weight pretty much as a stock flywheel now with those on it. So that's all we did there.
Hellbelly was asking about RDRS programming. There's nothing that we have yet to defeat RDRS, right?
No, I was talking to.
Well, you can defeat it, but then all your warning lights are going to be on. You're going to lose your ABS, and you're going to have lights on the dash all the time.
Yeah, so we don't have a complete solution yet.
But you can tune around it, except on the 21s. I'm not sure if anybody has
Yeah, it's a new ECM.
gotten the ECM code for the 21s yet.
Thundermax.
It's a new connector as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they completely redesigned the ECM for the 21 Daggers and Softails. The Thundermax is really close, and we are going to see if we can help them expedite that.
Well, we've also been talking with the guys at Zippers and Thundermax, and we're trying to get it to where Thundermax has their ECM where just boop, you hit a button, and it's like your bike never had RDRS. As soon as that comes out, we're going to be pushing that because we have a lot of guys that wish they didn't buy the bike with RDRS because they didn't know they couldn't turn it all the way off. So that's in progress of working. I'm not sure if it's a month out, if it's 8 months out. You know, you can think you're real close to having something ready, and then you run into a couple glitches, but that's something coming. It's a more expensive system, but if it has that button in there, it's worth it. 21 specials, Road Glide and Street Glide specials, only come from the factory with RDRS on them. It's not like we can order them with or without like we could when they first came out with it. There is a way, top secret, to go into Harley's system and get a special without RDRS if you're looking for one.
This is why
That's when you
can
call
never
me.
be in charge of the Army.
Hey, look at
We
this
have
cat
a
I
way.
have in a bag.
We have a way.
to
So
get
if
21s without RDRS.
and I think they're going to limit me on the number they allow me to order. So
They're watching right now.
we'll see. That's untested water, but I think
told
they're
you
going to
you
cut me off after a while.
I told you not to tell
So
Moonshine.
if your dealership says they can't get it without it, call me, Jamie, at the store. If you can't get hold of me, track Aaron down. We'll get it figured out. The only thing is if we get it that way, I'm pretty much having the bike built. So it's not like you're going to have it in a day or two. Harley's doing some of that stuff right now for us under a special program. So
It's a pilot program.
it's a piloted program by me.
Yeah.
So, we'll go a little different direction here because I got a question about engine oil coolers and the fans that you can put on, like the Ultra Cool or the
Jag.
I can't think of the
Love Jugs.
Love Jugs. Thank you. I couldn't think of it. What do you think about those, and is there any benefit to running, an extra oil cooler or fans on the side of it?
Well, Jim's has a cool one too, besides
Yeah,
those Love
it
Jugs.
does.
Jim's has probably the nicest one.
Is that the Ultra Cool, maybe?
No, Jim's is its own thing. It goes on your horn cover. It's actually it's pretty discreet. Love Jugs are probably the single ugliest thing you can put on a motorcycle, in my opinion.
They work.
But man, they work.
They
work.
Yeah,
They work.
I agree.
If you don't care what it looks like.
Yeah. So I came from I should
Florida.
say we came from
Oh.
Florida, and yeah, they do actually keep that motor where it needs to be in very hot climates.
Yeah, in Florida, you take the rear one and you turn it towards your crotch. You don't even care about the bike anymore in July. You're like, just turn it on me. Let's go.
Yeah.
Love nuts.
But yeah, and even the I believe the Harley fan that goes down there on the oil cooler and in the back, those do help as well.
Yeah, they do. They do work. They keep your oil a bit cooler. A lot of times people don't think they work because there's no light that comes on or something that says that they're operating, but they do work.
Or your exhaust is so loud you can't hear the fan.
Well, the Love Jugs sound like little airplanes when you turn the bike on. It's,
Yeah.
you're like, what the
Very
heck
cool.
is that?
They do work, though.
They do.
We go with the Harley fan kit. I mean, it's plug and play with Harley. It's done very nice.
It's very
Harley's
discreet.
Yeah, Harley's testing. I mean, they go through it with the wiring and stuff. It's the nicest one we've seen on the factory cooler. There's other setups out there, but to put something on the factory cooler, that's our go-to. If you
The
have
Jim's cooler goes right underneath the horn cover, so it's kind of like a Love Jug setup, but it has a fan. You still put your horn in there, but the fan pulls and sends it right through the V of the engine. So the hottest spot on the engine is where the air is directed. So the Jim's one works pretty good too.
And you can run both, just so you guys understand. We're talking about oil cooler fan system, and then fan system on the side of the motor where like your horn cover would be. So two different things. And you can run one or both.
I have some questions about the 135.
Ooh,
Yeah.
what you got?
Okay.
What's
Go
going
ahead.
on? How can I
Not
get?
a question.
How can I get one? You know, I
us.
got some questions. What horsepower and torque can I expect? When is it available? How do I get one? You know, what's
Definitely expect more horsepower and torque than a stock bike, for sure.
Well, that's good.
It depends on what cams, and we don't have every cam tested in it yet, but from what we're thinking is they're going to be 165 to 180. This is kind of the range they're going to play within. A streetable one should be 165 to 170 and some change in that ballpark somewhere, easily.
And streetable is used. I mean, that it's a 170 horse
It'll
torque
kick your
bike
ass.
is going to be a heck of a streetable bike.
Streetable, yeah. It'll run on pump gas.
Yeah.
You can stop, go. No, I mean, there's 143s running out there on the street that guys are touring with and stuff, and they are hotter, and they might not last 100,000 miles, but absolutely streetable. Most customers buying those things, you know, they're putting 4,000 to 8,000 miles on them a year. That's nothing. But that is coming. We'll have the first ones built in February, and we'll come back online with results and some graphs and all that good stuff on our Instagram. We'll probably do a video on it.
Yeah.
Mike get in the dyno and talk to the bike and rub it, do the things he does, and we'll post that. And then, you know,
Cry a little.
yeah, if you want pricing, we got Aaron over here or me, and we'll get that done. But that's a super cool setup. We've been working on it a while, and we'll start posting stuff on it as soon as we have it. We're excited about it as well. Super cool piston setup, really nice heads. We have help from a lot of guys in the industry making parts for that setup.
I have a quick answer question here because people are asking, do we have maps for this or that, and do we provide maps for builds?
If you buy a kit from us and you purchase a Power Vision, we'll load a map for you.
And
Just maps, no.
and still in those instances, it's still recommended to get that thing in a dyno.
Yeah, you need to
Yeah.
take it to a qualified tuner because it gets real complicated. Every motor is a little bit different, and all the bikes are different. And this, depending on the exhaust, the intake, and all the other accessories that you put on it, it's not real cost productive for us to be on the phone all the time, trying to diagnose things that are real difficult based on telephone conversations and sending new tunes and having you record data and send it back. It's just, we don't really have the time to spend to do that. So plus, most of the tunes that we have, if you purchase a tune and we dyno tune your bike, that tune belongs to you. So I'm not going to give it to somebody else. You pay for it, it's yours.
Back to this 135 setup. Some stuff that we do when we do these pop-up pistons, which gets back to the high compression question we had earlier, is
blanching.
balancing. So a lot of the setups we do, we take the flywheel out of the bike and we have it balanced to the total weight of your pistons with the pins, with the clips and the rings. That's something we do on, 70% of our builds. And we send either your flywheel out to Dark Horse, or if it's a setup like our 135s and we know what they weigh and you want to buy a flywheel, we'll have some of them in stock. But a lot of guys want to run their same flywheel, want it balanced, want rods put on it, whether we put on Carrillos or a different set. It is going to be balanced to that piston set perfectly. It's not off a little bit. We're not 10 grams off 20 grams. Shoot, me and Mike, we got extra scales this year just so we could test everyone's piston. And what we've noticed is what's out there and what guys think they're weighing and what we're actually weighing them on are a little different.
Yeah.
All over the map.
Yeah,
I
they're
mean,
all over the
they're
place.
all over the place. So that's something we started to keep track of. From Harley, from SNS's kit, everyone's kit, we weigh them so we can give Dark Horse or anyone else doing a flywheel the exact balance of them. So when we do a 135 kit, you need a flywheel. We're not using your stock flywheel. We can. You have an option to buy a man of war like this guy, or we can do a stock flywheel where we're going to weld it, pin it, put rods on it. And then some of our other setups, we do the same thing for. I think everything we do with heads nowadays, we're almost balancing the pistons to the flywheel.
every time we're in the bottom end.
Yeah. The only things we don't is the SNS kits. When we do that kit, we put heads on, we don't. But
Well-
everything else we do.
Yeah.
The next thing is when we do our high compression pistons, we're actually taking those with a pair of our cylinders that we had sleeved, or we're taking them with a pair of SNS cylinders. And every piston you get, there's always a variance. When you get down to the machining, it always says like plus or minus, you know, a little tiny bit just because of the quality. So we take them to the machine shop, we bring them the front piston, the rear piston, and we have them hone finish a cylinder to match exactly what that piston came out and was machined for. So it's actually fit to it. It's not like it's manufactured, we just have 100 and we just piece match them. Those are
The blueprinted.
blueprinted setups. Not only is the flywheel blueprinted to your pistons are blueprinted to your cylinder. which is
And
a
that
cool
kind of
setup.
leads into a good question I have here, which is the difference in a Moonshine 128 and a Moonshine 131, and what's the difference in reliability or longevity in the two?
Only difference between those motors is the stroke. Realistically.
And so you're putting a new flywheel in it.
Yeah.
And now does that provide more longevity or reliability than, say, a stock crank with a 128?
Well, because it's moving the piston farther, it wears more. The piston's moving faster, it's moving farther, so there's a little more wear with a stroker motor. So if you went longevity just off of that, you'd have more longevity with the shorter stroke than you do with the longer stroke.
And it's a little bit of a loaded question too, because on a 128, you can build a 128 stage 3 on a stock bottom end. When you're doing a 131, the way we do it, you're using an aftermarket flywheel.
And correct, that's kind of what I was leading into. A difference in throwing a 128 kit on a motor and then doing something like a Moonshine 131, where we're going to go into the bottom end. You're going to
Yeah.
get a welded
Now,
flywheel or
that's
whatever.
unless we
you know.
go in there and we correct it. Like we'll see bikes with run out 3,000, 7,000s. It kind of it is what it is. We do one of these, they come out half a thousand
Yeah.
less when they're done.
And
they're
a
welded and
crank like
plugged
that,
and-
longevity shouldn't necessarily be an issue. I think.
No, we haven't run any longevity issues at all.
None.
I mean, we're hitting 45, 50,000 miles now with some of the motors we did 2 and 3 years ago. And they're still coming in and getting serviced and heading right back out the door. So
So
But when you do a flywheel, you get to take that counterbalancer out, which that thing's like 4 pounds,
Yeah.
right? We take that guy out, it makes a difference.
I'm not
And-
sure.
and so
he's
how does
broken the
that-
scale.
how does that affect your bike?
Broke my toe.
Got you a new one.
You talk about removing the balancer, and how does that affect the ride of the bike on a touring and then on a softail where there's two, and we have removed both of them in a softail too. How does that affect a softail as well?
Well, in a softail, you're going to have a noticeable vibration because it's going to, the whole purpose of the counterbalancers in the Milwaukee 8s and in the twin cam motors was to even out the vibration because it's a rigid mounted motor. So when you remove the counterbalancers, you're still going to have some vibration even with a balanced motor just because of the engine design. It's not nearly like it was back in the Evo days, but and all the custom Evos that I built back when I was younger, I mean, everything, if you didn't need it on the bike, you didn't put it on there because it fell off anyway. Because of the powertrain vibration. We're out of those days, but you can definitely tell that there's a vibration on the softails. On the touring bike, it idles more like a twin cam. Other than an idle, it's perfectly fine because it's a rubber balance.
I would say it would be identical to a twin cam.
Yeah,
for the most part.
just
I mean,
the way
identical.
the handlebars shake and and when they made the Milwaukee 8 engine, I think they had to debalance it just a little bit because when they originally made them, they balanced them perfectly, and they were so smooth that people didn't like it. The first
Actually, that
testing,
was stuff I've
were
heard
like,
that
"Oh, I
as
don't even
well.
like
Yeah,
this."
yeah, it was too smooth, so they backed down the size of the balancer or whatever
Just so it had a little bit of
yeah.
vibration when it idles, because people like that. It's an American icon.
America.
I mean, if I bought a 1969 Chevelle and it didn't make noise and vibrate, I'd be like, what did I just buy?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I didn't want a
What the hell
Honda.
kind of engine's in this thing? It's got a Volkswagen.
well, George Bright, when he was over here the other day at El Camino, when he started the car up, I thought it was going to flip over. Big plug of that thing. It was awesome.
We all have old big block cars, I think, don't we?
That's cool. So I mean, that's where you're at. I want something when you hit the gas, the whole car just torques to the right, sitting at a stoplight. I mean,
There's one question over there that I saw. Is the 135 we're talking about a Harley product or aftermarket? It is 100% aftermarket.
Not 100%.
that
Well,
is
except for the cases.
The engine case is
The
hard.
cases are stock. Other than that,
Yeah, our 135 setup, we're doing a flywheel like this. You're going to get a pair of custom gas-ported top ring pistons with total seal rings in it, our cylinders, a pair of our heads.
The case is line bored
Yeah.
to fit the bigger cylinders, because the OD of the cylinders will not fit in a stock engine case.
We can Temkin it at that time. We can not Temkin it. I mean, there's some benefits to it. Is it needed? No. But when we do that build, we're going through every little piece of the motor and letting you pick how much you want to do and what you want to build. But that's not a setup we'll build on stock heads.
No.
That's not a budget build. And we've been building these things, and we don't put these big builds out there just because they're costly, and everyone calls and wants one and thinks it's like $6 or $7 grand, and they get up there quick. I mean, you're talking just this piece installed in a bike is 3 Gs right there. This one, the way it's set up. But I mean, a flywheel installed in a bike, you're talking anywhere from $2 grand to $3 grand, depending on the options you pick and what you want to do.
And we've talked about this previously in videos and stuff. And as you build that motor, you go further down the line, and there's things you need to do in the
Yeah, the
primary
surrounding
and,
parts add up
and
super
other
quick.
stuff. And I had a few questions about, when do I need to go do a chain? When is it time for me to ditch the belt and grab a chain?
Mike will say when it breaks,
Yeah.
probably. And I wouldn't disagree too much. I mean, to me, really, it kind of depends, like, what you're doing with the bike. If you're street racing it, if you want to wheelie it, and you want to eliminate that possibility of being there in the starting line and you let the clutch out and nothing happens except the motor taking off.
If you want to look badass,
Or if you want to inexpensively re-gear it, you know what I mean?
Well, I don't know. When I'm beating on my bike, I know when I'm beating on my bike. When I'm riding it, modestly, I know. Some days I'm riding, I'm like, dude, something's going to let go on this belt or something. Because I like to keep my belt as long as possible. I typically, the only thing I put a chain on is a Dyna because we're wheeling it, doing stuff like that, re-gearing it. But I like a belt. Doesn't make a lot of noise. It's easy. I don't have to
maintenance.
clean it.
yeah, never have to adjust.
It's more
it.
efficient.
Yeah, so if you're a guy that gets one of these builds and you know you're just going to beat the living shit out of it, do the chain.
Yeah.
If you're not sure, I would be putting a mark on the back of my swing arm with like a paint marker and the cam there for your tensioner. See if you're pulling it forward. If you're pulling it forward over and over and have to keep adjusting it, I think you might be riding a little bit harder. But then again, we've talked about this multiple times. If you go and check your belt underneath your bike and there's never teeth missing, no chunks, rock and roll. You get into one day and there's 2 chunks in your whole belt, not a big deal. You get into one day and you're like, ooh, there's some damage here. I might want to be careful. That's when you're like, okay, I'm getting aggressive enough where this is going to happen. And you can rip all your teeth off of your belt in a day if you wanted to. But you know you did it.
In
It's
24
not like
hours.
it was an accident.
We've seen it.
I ripped these off and I was
That was
just
a
rolling
world record.
slide.
You're watching.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing we get too is on the trannies. They're like, oh, I wasn't doing anything. And we've talked about this before. You weren't doing anything that day, but you beat it previous days.
Yeah.
And that was just the day everything let go and just ripped apart. You put
So
a chain on your bike.
I did.
we do chains a lot.
A lot.
When we're doing a case, a full build on a bike, it's a lot easier at that point.
That's true, too.
You save quite a bit of labor doing
Yeah.
it there because it's not an easy task. You got to pull the primary and all that stuff off. So we do it a lot, but most of the time it's on our big builds. And because you're kind of already in there, it's going to cost a lot more for that
Yeah.
person to come back and do it later.
I mean, just the inner primary kit alone is like $113.
Yeah.
So if you're there and you're already doing the work, knock it out. If that's really what your end goal is, go for it.
And we talked a little bit about gearing and have you really messed with the gear ratios a lot or changed a lot with the front sprocket or the rear sprocket for
Yeah.
power?
Yeah.
And what have you seen? I mean, is there a big advantage to changing that, or is the stock setup fairly spot on?
Depends on the motor you build.
And your riding style. You know what you're going to do with it. If you're building an 8th mile bike or like a street, like grudge style bike, if you're not just going to spank the tire with too much gear, yes, gear it. It will accelerate quicker. It's a torque multiplier in that sense, right?
Well, some of those strokers we're building where they're like 155, 160 foot-pounds of torque.
You may have too much in that case, right?
You have so much torque, it's just ripping the tire loose. So if you have that much torque, you can highway gear it so it's a taller gear, so it runs out more on the highway, and it calms it down in the bottom and doesn't make it so aggressive.
Cops love it when you're doing 120 on the freeway.
No, you do that gear, you run 140.
Closed course only.
They love it. They're like, oh, look at this guy.
I think they're just gonna give you like, yeah, look at that. The Harley's doing that. We're gonna let this guy go. Let's let him go.
My
He's
hero.
nuts.
Well, first they'll catch up to you and be like, let me get it on film. No one's gonna believe me.
With his radar gun.
Do it again. Do it again.
I don't know.
Okay, I'm gonna take it to jail, but I wanted to get the film.
That might just be our state, though. That might not be every state you're in. Be
It's
careful.
true. It's true. Some of them aren't real neighborly.
Yeah, and if you have stock suspension, don't do that. Please don't do that.
Don't ever run 120 miles.
We
an
never
hour.
do.
We never said to
Never.
run 100. Run the posted
Do
speed
not
limit
condone
for the
this.
area you're in, and that is it.
So
You build
you mentioned
160
suspension.
horsepower motors to go 70 miles
Well, back
an
to
hour.
these chains. I want to go over two things. The chains, that chain conversion, two customers we see. The first customer is, I'm going to beat this thing, don't want to worry about it. I built it this way. That's the customer who buys it. The other customer buys the chain kit. The conversion is, hey, I don't want to be headed to Bike Week and have an issue. I don't want to ever worry about it. I just want to get it out of the way, make the investment today. Those are the two reasons we usually see the chain kit being done for those two customers.
And now a chain does require a lot of maintenance
Yeah.
and adjustment.
Cleaning,
I
adjustment.
wouldn't say a lot. It requires more maintenance than the belt, but I mean, every sport bike you've ever had, and a lot of guys were building these big motors in these baggers or a soft tail, any of the bikes we're building. Most of them have, I would say more than half of them have come off the street bike road.
Yeah.
And they understand what it takes. They understand they're going to have to wax it. They understand they're going to have to brush it. They understand they're going to have to do the little adjustments on it. So most of the guys are set up to handle it. And it's nothing that you can't watch a video or us instruct you or see something to do yourself.
Emerald City Bagger.
What does it say? Oh, I'm talking to him.
So
Yeah.
you kind of mentioned suspension.
How come we never see the interviewer? We
Oh,
talked about
yeah, we
because
talked about that.
We
He's
got him
camera shy.
from. Well,
Yeah.
once again, you might have missed the beginning.
You
but
don't want to see the interview.
Roy is our
horribly
out of work
Yeah, he has a voice
strip
for
club
radio.
DJ.
Yes.
Okay,
Face
he's
it.
He has a
unemployed
face
because of
for radio.
COVID.
I mean,
Yes.
Because of COVID.
Yeah,
I got the voice. I didn't
But
get
but
the
they did say
Yeah.
strip clubs are essential. So how did you lose your job?
because they turn the lights on.
Everybody out. Whoa, shit.
scaring away the patrons.
We're just kidding. We'll introduce you to Roy at the end. Because before he was a strip club DJ, he was a 20-year master tech that worked here. He still does part-time. He moonlights here now.
Yeah.
His main gig is, showing off for the ladies. And sketch.
So
Sketch-
again,
Sketch likes watching him
you
DJ.
know, suspension.
He's cracking up.
What kind of benefits am I going to see from upgrading my suspension from stock? Well, I don't want to say what's wrong with stock because obviously it handles very well. It's been a very successful platform. But what kind of benefits am I going to see from going to a better suspension system?
A lot. Control.
You
Way
get all
better
the
control.
chicks.
All the chicks.
Yeah, with the canisters on the back, you get
Well,
all the chicks.
yes. Unless you're spending a lot of money and you have canister, a lot of times suspension you can't see, especially on baggers and on front suspension on just about everything. You can have some pretty good suspension nobody will ever know. So there has to be some good feedback to the rider in that point. And is it just make it stiffer, or should you see?
We've talked about it before. Like the main idea is just keeping the tire in contact with the road as much as possible. Whether it's in pitch, dive, roll, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Keeping the tire in contact with the road under those different conditions is what makes a good suspension good. Controlling the movement of the swing arm, controlling dive under braking, and just keeping contact patch on the road makes good handling. And that's what those do extremely well. Any of the systems, Öhlins, Legend, Progressive, doesn't matter. It's all going to be better than stock provided it's set up right. And you've ordered the right stuff for the bike.
I want to get to some customers that are hitting
Yeah,
questions
and
now,
Sam
just because
Mooney,
we've been on
Sam
these.
Mooney, call me tomorrow.
Well, the hydraulic clutch and master cylinders from Behringer, we've got some workarounds. That's not something that every shop's going to do.
Yeah.
Where you're going to do them because
the switch
Behringer
setup.
didn't design them to work with the Harley control setup to hit your safety switches or your brake or your clutch. So we have the little switches in there that you can get from Behringer that we have to modify to work with it, and we left that up to Mike. I did it on my bike. We can get it done so all your factory stuff works, but it's not something that you're pretty much going to do yourself unless you're doing this for a living or you're an aircraft mechanic, and it's not something I would say 90% of shops out there are going to be able to handle on the bike. So if you want that, call us. We can get it set up. There's, you know, I don't know if Sacha's going to build any more bikes, but he can do it. He's been in here. We've done one with him. Another thing we have there is someone's asking about horsepower to the crank and horsepower to the ground. Everyone's dynoing Harley's rear wheel. It's not like we're pulling on motors, putting on motor dynos. So everyone's doing it. The only difference we see is there's a standard setting and there's a SAE. Standard usually gives you a higher number. SAE is more known in the industry. It's more shared. So that's the number we put all of our dyno sheets on. And it just changes it. That's pretty much
It's typically a lower number, but the number on a dyno is irrelevant. The one thing that people don't realize is what you're looking for on the dyno is how smooth the power curve is and how well the air-fuel ratio is tuned. Every single dyno machine is going to give you a different number. Some are higher than others. You have SAE versus DIN versus standard correction, and you'll see different corrections all over the place. None of that matters. What you want to look at is what the curve actually looks like. That's how you know if you have a good setup, if you have a good tune.
There's a good question there about the 122.
I saw that.
Yeah, somebody had a really good question about the 122 cylinder and piston kit, and that's kind of topical for us. We just had one of those bikes in the shop that we delivered for Mr. Kazmanoff. We rebuilt the 122. We put our 492 cam in it with a 55 millimeter manifold, and that
Just-
little thing ripped.
Just ripped.
Is that the red bike?
Just
I forgot what color it is,
Retro
but
bike
he liked
rubber?
it so much he came back and bought
no,
a
that
second
was,
bike.
That was Liddell.
Yeah.
He bought a second bike, and now we're building him a 128 in a Road
Yeah.
King.
That 492 is a
it was
beast.
good.
For stock
492
heads,
is a
that's a
great
good
cam.
cam. That outperforms some larger cams out there in the market.
So yeah, if you've got a 122 and you do want to add a little bit more, you know, giddy up in it, step.
What did that guy
brap.
make on a 124 the other day?
I don't remember.
What, 492?
492 on a 124 made like 130 horse and real close to 158 foot-pounds of torque.
No, it was like 148.
Was it 148?
Yeah,
something
maybe,
like that.
maybe in the middle.
I
Not
forget.
158.
You see so many sheets, I can't even remember.
I,
anymore.
couldn't- I knew it was more than we normally see. I was like, wow, 124
ran
was
good.
good.
So there's a
Stock
question
heads.
on there as well about clutch baskets, Trask or Barnett,
We have them all.
They're both good.
That's why they're on back.
and there are some fitment, I believe, issues. Some will work with some other things and some won't. So depending on who's building it, I think we ran into something where a clutch
Yeah,
setup.
yeah. Depending on the hub style and the actual clutch design, some of those baskets, because of the way Barnett versus Trask builds them, some baskets work better with some combinations than others.
Oh, was that that floor height thing that you were looking at?
Yeah, so a
Well,
lot of that also
this guy over
depends
here
on with
goes,
what
I
kind of
thought
clutch
the
you want
numbers
to run.
didn't matter
The numbers don't matter.
on the dyno. They matter to get there because, I mean, if you're making 100 horse, 150, those
I think
numbers
he's
matter.
making fun of
So-
me.
He's making fun of them.
We got another one there, and we touched on this a little bit earlier.
This isn't Twitter, buddy.
Which was
Ryan, troll.
yeah, can you tune a 2021? And yes, you can 100% because Harley has released a tuner. So if you wanted to do a Harley kit and a Harley tuner,
Well, I don't.
it
I
is.
cannot confirm that that they have.
They
tune.
do. They
They have
do.
a cable.
Well, yeah,
I don't know.
they have the
I don't
cable.
know if they have tunes for it. 'Cause,
Yeah.
You know, when they came out with the 131, they didn't have a tune for it for like 3 months.
Yeah, the Softail took a hit on that. They
Yeah,
didn't have one
so
for Softail for
I
quite
don't.
a
I
bit.
don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Ryan.
But they are first. Harley has released a tuner, or supposedly released a tuner.
Hey, Roy.
I
and
have
there is a
seen
way
the
around it.
cable.
Yes.
They say you need.
Yes, yeah.
That's the
We'll
only
confirm
thing
when
that-
it's in our hands and we can actually do it.
Yeah.
But then we'll
Yeah.
confirm back to you.
Yeah.
Something we need to do, Roy. We need to step up. How cool would it be if the customers can actually talk to us so we can play around with them and have
Yeah.
them bounce a couple questions. That's something we got to work on. Is your little setup or big setup over
They
there?
call in and we
I-
can
I-
listen to them like a radio show.
This is super cool.
How do we do that?
This is the first time we had it. We can actually see
I
stuff.
want
Yeah,
to talk
that's
to
pretty
Ryan.
cool.
I want Ryan to make fun of us like to our face on the phone. And then we can talk shit back and forth a little bit. That would be cool. Is that something we can do?
Maybe.
Can
Yeah.
you send him like middle finger emojis?
Mike, you can make a special delivery.
That's right.
That's what you're good at.
Barnett, clutch basket, or Trask?
Yeah, that's what.
We go with the Trask.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we do.
usually
do.
the Trask.
But it isn't, I think most of that was availability. They work well with the clutch designs that we have.
Hellbilly. Thanks, Hellbilly. Love you too, buddy. He also said his stuff froze up earlier, and I was like, he's Hillbilly. Arnold.
Arnold's got a
Arnold
special
too.
delivery.
Arnold won.
coming in hot.
Mike can actually see that. Drone. Love it.
I love it.
All right. So
Those
I
are
have
our customers. That's our people right there.
That's right.
That's our people.
MVO.
I have a fairly. A lot of these, bring us back to things we've said before, but I have a fairly specific question here, which is, what is the difference between, say, an SNS 475 and an SNS 540 camshaft on a full Stage 4 Screaming Eagle 114? My tuner wants me to use the 540, but I'm in for the 475 because of the torque and my wish for smooth ride.
I would use the 475.
Why is that? Is it?
That 540 is going to be a little much lift for a 114. You're going to have a little bit more air than a bike's going to like. What typically happens when you overcam the bike is you have a dip or a real flat spot from takeoff to about 3,000 RPMs, and then it feels like a two-stroke power band. And they'll make great top-end power, but everywhere where you like to ride, which is usually between 2,500 and 3,500 RPMs, that sweet spot right in the middle of that, it's really, really hard to handle because you'll be right on the edge where when you touch the throttle, it's super twitchy. And if you back down a little bit more, you've got to downshift for it to get out of its own way.
Well, something else we see
More
too.
lift is not better in cams. I think that for some reason that wives' tale has been around for a long, because they do it in cars too.
Yeah.
There's like, I need the biggest lift cam I can. The lift is not, we make more power with a 492 lift cam than a lot of the 550 and 540 lift cams that are on the market.
And
Same exact
a
setup.
lot of that has to do with setting the motor up properly to
Yeah.
handle that cam.
Yeah,
as
you've got to
well.
design the engine for what the cam is actually specifically designed to do.
Well, also think about some other shops. We build 2 big motors every single day. Every single day. You look in our shop and we'll
I
have.
think we build 2 on Sunday. one on Sunday.
But like if you look around our
2 every
shops,
day, 1 on Sunday. I love that.
if we gave you a tour
Make a
between our
sticker.
warehouse and this building, we probably have 30 bikes with motors torn out of them right now. Some guys are waiting for their flywheels to come back. Some guys are waiting on heads. We got bikes all over.
We got that
Some
one going
shops
together,
do
that one's
one
going
every
together.
couple months.
That one's going. Look, Jordan's.
Yeah.
You working?
Jordan's still over there building
Jordan's
one
still
right
building
now.
the motor.
Yeah.
Well,
He said,
last
"Oh,
time
you
we
guys
were doing this, he
staying? I
was
got
the one
work
in the
to do."
dyno.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
So
He's got a traveler.
Well, let me get back to the point here. So some shops only build a couple of these. So my thing to that guy is, does he have a dyno of that exact setup? So he can show you the graph, hey, this is why I want to build it, and say it. Or is he just excited because he gets to finally build one, saw that cam and is excited about that cam and just wants to stick it in a motor?
Yeah.
We see everything, and I don't know what shop it is. I don't know if it's a Harley shop or aftermarket shop, but that's where my question is. We see a lot of guys that go to these shops, and someone at the shop is very energetic and excited to put this cam in, talks them into it, and it doesn't do what either one of them thought, and then it's over, and they don't want to fix it. If we put the wrong cam in your bike, and it's something new we're trying, and it doesn't hit the mark,
You're never even gonna know.
because we're just going to fix it. Or we're going to call you, be like, hey, that didn't get the numbers, we're going to plan B.
From somebody
Let's
that's
try
been
it.
here a while.
And that happened yesterday alone.
It happens a lot, actually. Over the last few years, it has happened quite a bit where we have done a setup and not been happy with it, and it gets fixed
Yeah, exhaust problem.
before the customer knows.
Different
Yeah.
cam, needs more compression, over
Yeah.
compression. We've gone through it. We're still learning stuff on these setups.
And this is why a lot of shops don't do this to the degree we do because it can cost money to the shop when things like that happen.
Guys,
And
grab us some
does.
rings.
you know, it's very tough. So I got a question from
Total
Jimmy
Seals.
Fat
The new
Bob.
side Total Seals, grab 'em.
He says, at what
Seals.
horsepower and torque
Rings.
should I be looking to upgrade the
Rings.
gearbox internals on an M8 Softail? Already running a Man of War comp and Barnett clutch basket. So it sounds like he's already bulletproofed his primary for the most part. At what point does the gearbox need to be upgraded?
When it breaks.
Yeah.
We did 5 this week.
Yeah.
5 transmissions this week
Not
alone.
to say all broke.
Yeah. I mean, they'll break on stage 3. They'll
I
break.
was
on
going to
our
say
big
stock.
motors.
I was going to say
Stock,
stock.
yeah.
You can roast the
Yeah, we've
transmission
seen
and
what,
stuff
4
on
or
stock.
5 stock
Yeah.
bikes came in with
Yeah.
blowing up their gears. I mean, it's not. And we've got, a couple guys like Harold Walker. Harold Walker is an absolute animal.
Yeah.
Stock transmission. stock
Everybody
built.
in Chicago is afraid of Harold.
Man, I think everybody in
Everybody.
America is afraid of that guy. He roasts everybody in Chicago. He goes down to Florida, roasts everybody there, rides over to California, roasts half of California, then comes back, goes back to California and smokes
Yeah.
the rest of
And
it.
what did he say? I want an oil change.
And it's all, yeah.
Thank you, man.
And
Yeah.
that's all on stock transmission, stock built. I mean, he's
A lot of that has to do with how you're riding and what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
If you want to go out and try to do burnouts and wheelies all day and stunt the bike, you're going to need to bulletproof everything you can. Because, when especially we're putting a lot of power to the ground with these Milwaukee 8s through that drivetrain. Probably more than that drivetrain was ever really designed for.
and make sure you turn your mic off when you go in the bathroom. It's going to be embarrassing.
Glad you told me.
That would be so awesome.
Oh, that would have been the best thing ever.
Yeah. So do we do an intermission or what's happening now?
No, I'm
How
grabbing a
does this
piston.
work?
He's grabbing he wants to talk about
Run the
it.
show,
So-
Mike.
Let's see. We can answer a couple questions
So,
here.
one of the other things we haven't talked about, and I feel like we need to go back to things we've talked about before because not everybody that's watching has probably watched everything we've done. We kind of talked about suspension and stuff like that. Down to tires, what kind of options are out there for tires on a newer bike? A bagger, because we do a lot of baggers, even the soft tails. What are people running on them, and what have you seen?
I'm running Bridgestone.
I run Bridgestone. We've got a lot of the police force running Bridgestones.
And those Bridgestones are
The H50,
H50s.
Battle Cruise.
Battle
Yeah,
Cruise.
Battle Cruise H50.
And they have a very aggressive sidewall profile.
Yes.
Yeah, they tip in and hold side angle really nice.
I run them on my bike, so I can speak from experience. But even on the baggers, you can tell as soon as you get on one and ride whether or not they have those tires. I mean, when you get on one that has them, and when you dip into a corner, the bike actually wants to lay into that corner much easier than others. And I believe like Night Dragons, Jamie had some Night Dragons. He still might be running them on his bike.
on the
I've been told
road
that
bike?
they're kind of similar to the Night Dragons in the profile of them, the way they want to dive into corners.
Did
Is
Pirelli
that true?
redesign their tire after the Bridgestone came out? And they have another one coming out?
No, the Metzlers did.
Oh, Metzler
That's
did
what,
that.
yeah.
Well, the Night Dragons are real sticky, but they're a little softer sidewall. There's more flex on them. It's a light tire, real light tire. Once they get hot, they're awesome. But they're real particular on pressure because the sidewall is not as thick. It doesn't have as many layers as that new Pirelli's thicker. It's supposed to do a little more. I put those on my new bike, but it's not something that is for the average guy. That's for a guy that wants to buy tires because they wear out fast.
And that's the difference.
Man, you have a
wanna buy
tire that
tires.
wears out real fast. I don't want to buy tires.
No, but I mean, they grip the road. It does everything great.
So
but-
we
I'm
get
the guy that wants
yeah.
to buy tires.
Hey, those are the ones I do.
you get a lot of guys that want to buy Shinkos or cheaper tires because they're doing burnouts or whatever. Those tires don't usually have nearly as stiff of a sidewall as, say, a Dunlop, or the Bridgestones have a really stiff sidewall. They're fun to get on and off for sure. But what are the advantages to a stiffer sidewall? Why is it kind of bad not to have a stiff sidewall?
Well, the sidewall is going to give you the rigidity when you're leaning into a corner and you're putting the pressure on the sidewall. the stiffer the sidewall, the more rigid the
What is
tire
in
is going to
Harold
stay.
Walker's bike?
'Cause you don't want to roll the edge of your
Does
tire.
your 492 hit harder than a drunk stepdad?
Yeah.
Nope.
And,
Depends on the dad.
somebody,
Depends on the stepdad.
somebody
I mean, if your
asked, he goes-
stepdad was Kimbo Slice, no.
somebody asked, he goes like, what's done to Harold Walker's bike in Chicago and Florida is afraid of it? Well, he's out street racing it, so I'm not going to burn his game. So
Yeah, and it's
go
an
to
ultra.
Chicago,
It's a
fuck around and
107
find out.
with a
It's
465.
bone stock.
Yeah.
Bone.
Bone
It's a
stock,
stock
mild
King
cam.
Harley
It's
Davidson
all
Ultra
good.
Classic.
He's got $500 for you, and he's looking for it.
Well, a lot of these guys are built in 128s and 124s, that SNS setup, or 131. So we did a little video on this. I did like a week ago, and we posted it. We gas ported the top ring for better ring seal for you guys. So for you guys running a 124 SNS package, which this is a 124 piston out of their setup, a 128 or their 131, they're all 4.250 bore. We had Total Seal design a ring for those pistons. We sent a pair of the pistons out to them. They checked them out. They said, hey, give us the best ring pack we can get for this piston for everyday street riding and racing here and there, you know, street strip. And this is the ring pack they came up with. What do we retail these for? 119 and some change.
Yeah, 120.
And you just replace the rings that you have in the kit. We've also talked about if you put that kit on your bike, a 124, 128 with a 131, and then now you want more horse, you want to add heads. Well, when we take everything loose, you're putting a new base gasket on it, you're putting a brand new head gasket on it, so we're pulling the cylinder off. When we're doing that, we're ringing it. So at that time, if you're going to add something, get a pair of these rings. Depending on how your cylinders look, you might want to do a slight hone.
Yeah.
So
And
get
I
those to
don't,
see.
and we actually had somebody call today. That's a really good point. And he has a Fuel Moto 128 kit and whatever else, and he wanted to buy the rings to re-ring his. And, you know, I don't know what pistons are in that kit. So these are, they're very specific. You can't just buy rings and throw them in whatever. They're real specific to the piston design. So these are specifically made for the SNS kits.
Yep.
If you have like a Zippers kit or a T-Man kit or a Fuel Moto kit, I'm not sure what pistons you have. So if you don't know what pistons you have,
The
and you
ring
buy
lens
rings,
could be different.
you're going to cause a lot of problems.
And did we talk about the advantage of this setup yet?
Well, I don't think Zippers runs the same exact diameter. They could. We don't know. I'd have to talk
Yeah,
to Dan.
it depends.
T-Man doesn't. I believe a lot of the kits that Jamie from Fuel Moto have are SNS, but
But
you'd
I
have to
don't
call
know.
him
Yeah.
and verify if it
I don't
is their
know how
piston or
many
not.
different setups they use.
Yeah, he does some cool stuff too, so something to know. We would just need to know that and see if you had that configuration of that piston. What were you going to say?
The advantage of this setup.
Well, there's a lot of PSI on the top of this ring in these motors. They make a lot of cranking pressure. They're like 1,800 PSI on the top of this ring here. And what this does is it allows more of the gas, instead of it blowing just on the side, it hits these little grooves. Randy, can they see that little groove? So there's little grooves cut into the ring, so when the air hits it, it helps it go behind the ring faster.
And it's a lower tension ring, so you don't have as much parasitic drag going on in there. And then you gas port it, pressure comes in behind the ring, and then when it's under pressure, pushes it out. So you don't have quite as much drag coming down on those strokes that aren't under force, basically. So it helps, you know, in theory, to make power.
Yeah, and I mean, when you have the combustion on top of the ring sealing so much bore, it's helping the blow-by in the motor too. So you're getting less blow-by of the ring, more power there. With less blow-by, that's less burnt particles that go past the ring into your oil. You know, when your oil turns black, that's where it's coming from. It's not coming from just because the oil's old. It's because it's being contaminated by burnt fuel for the most part. Something else is we could do it in the piston, but a lot of these pistons from SNS, they came that way, so the only way gas port it's in the ring. So we do it both ways. Our 135 is gas port the same way, but we did it with the piston and not the ring.
Yeah, somebody asked in one of the questions about gas porting pistons and why.
Well, if it was a race motor, we would laterally gas port it in the top of the piston. But the difference is, you know, for wide open throttle, that's great, makes a ton of power, it's better, but that's not better for someone who's going to be sitting at a stoplight, sitting in traffic, hot and cold, where you get a little more carbon buildup. The ring, because it's steel has better properties to actually clean easier than aluminum, just the way it's set up. Oil has detergents and all the additives in it. So in this ring, is scraping your cylinder wall. It's getting oil on it. The oil's cleaning the passages out and just stays cleaner, easier that way. It'll actually stay cleaner than aluminum hole in the piston too. So super cool.
So
small upgrade.
There's
119.
a specific question here, and I think Mike might have been looking at it, which was your thoughts on a 777 on a 10.5 to 1 twin cam 110.
I was not looking at that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so a Wood 777 on 10.5 to 1 110. So 10.5 to 1 110
Yeah,
is
that's pretty good.
a pretty good
Nice
setup.
setup.
Yeah.
America rings.
Now on
America.
something like that, so let's say you're setting that up. Does that would something like that require heads?
It would
I
benefit.
would probably do head work on the Woods.
So
7.
intake, head work to get the most out of that cam.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're
You
gonna
could run it if you were running that compression. You could run it without the heads, but you're gonna get better results with heads.
yeah.
No, I was actually looking at Mike Lugo has a 122 SE with a DD billet cat. I don't think I would really, unless you wanted the extra displacement, you could put a aftermarket cam in there and probably get the power you're looking for. We just did that.
Yeah, I mean,
what he was talking
that's
about
the
before with our
492.
492
Yeah.
cam.
And
With
what
that
would you go?
492
So
in
he
it.
said
You're
he
gonna want
wants.
to make sure you dyno tune that.
So he's looking for a square motor, 130, 130. Can would you think you'd be able to do that with just a cam,
On
or
the
do you
twin
think?
cam or this guy? This Mike
No, the
Lugo?
128,
Oh, I was
122.
like, yeah, he's not gonna do that with a 207.
Yeah, he's talking about doing a 128 and trying to get 130, 130. What does it take to do something like
I
that?
think you could get pretty close to that with just a cam.
Well, you can get more torque than that, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd be in the 145 range.
especially with the billet cat, we'll probably break 140 torque on that.
And still see in the
You've
130 range and
You've
horsepower.
got to remember that the Screaming Eagle
125
cams are 50 state EPA compliant setups. They have no choice.
On that,
So the cams we put in are not necessarily 50 state EPA compliant. They're for off-road use only.
I tell people all the time, when you talk about the Harley setups, it's a series of stacked compromise, right? There's EPA they have to worry about. There's the guy that's in the boardroom worried about how it sounds. There's the guy in the boardroom worried about how much it costs. There's the guy in the boardroom worried about, how expensive it is.
To build.
Yeah, everything. Like assembly costs, everything.
There's a lot that goes into it.
Our stuff, the stuff that we sell, is absolutely no compromise. We're not really too partial to vendors. Just the best stuff we can get our hands on that makes the most power possible, we put in. That's it.
And can handle the supply.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's another concern too, right?
Yeah,
for Arnold, we use the Harley oil filter because we change our oil so much in these machines. We don't have to get crazy on oil filter. I mean, they all do a very good job. You can go crazy, but most of our customers, 2,500 miles, they're changing the oil. Worst case scenario, most of the guys with the motor like this, 5,000. But we see most guys, they want to change the oil before they hit 3,000 miles.
Yeah.
That's pretty common. It's easy to do. It's not a lot of oil. It's not like your car. You got to climb under it. It's an easy job.
What are your thoughts on the reusable oil filters?
I'm not a fan. They are not that good of a filter. I mean, they're cool to look at, and they cost like what, $120, something like that, $150. If you really think about the economics, a 15 micron, I think that's what they're up to now, right? Harley Davidson filter that's designed for the particular size for this engine, they cost $9. So you have to change your oil 12 times before you're actually getting a cost benefit for that $120 oil filter you just bought. So if you do it at the service intervals at every 5,000 miles, I mean, 12 times 5,
Yeah. You
You
got
know.
60,000 miles
Yeah.
or whatever it is there. Yeah.
you're putting 60,000 miles on the bike before you actually make up the cost savings for a reusable filter. And all that's on the inside of it is a big screen.
Yeah. As a technician, I've taken those out and cleaned them, and I can't wrap my head around how
No.
they filter nearly as well
Yeah.
as
I
a
want to
regular
throw it
oil
out,
filter.
get all that stuff out, because
I
even
mean-
though you clean it, it's not 100%.
Yeah, if you want it to just look cool, then that's fine. If you want the knurled look or something, or for some reason the look of a regular oil filter just bothers you. But I don't recommend them for engine performance or longevity. If somebody wanted us to put a $9,000 engine build on there and run that oil filter, I'd say you're at the wrong shop.
Well, next question here, Johnny wants to know, what do you get out of a Zippers 552? We typically pair that cam with a big bore, so that's going to be with a 122 on up to a 131 with heads.
With heads. throttle
And
body.
you're looking 140 to 150. That's a good range to
Yeah.
be in, depending on the setup on that cam. It's a taller cam, it's a 550, but it closes pretty quick. That's a torquier setup. It's not a big, high horsepower cam.
Chris's bike rips with that setup.
Yeah, it's a cool cam. It's a really good street cam.
Doesn't
with
hurt that he
heads,
put
though.
carbon
With
fiber
heads.
wheels on it either. Harry asked real quick in there about what tire we were talking about. It's the H50 Battle Cruise. That's the tire.
Yeah. Bridgestone only makes one tire for the Harleys.
So I have a question here. 2016 Cvo Breakout, bought used. Don't know what kind of work was done to it. I can see it's got a 66 millimeter SNS throttle body. Gets only 110 miles to a full tank. I think it needs a tune. What do you recommend?
Get it tuned.
66
So,
millimeter.
and this brings up a topic that I think we could touch on a little bit, which is fuel mileage when you're building a big motor. You know, what do you expect to see? Are you going to see a drop in mileage?
On the highway riding around, not too much. You know, you're still going to get between 35 and 40 miles to the gallon almost all the
saw that
time.
one.
When you're zipping around town, because you're going to be into the throttle so much, you're going to burn through some fuel. But when you're just out cruising, you're not going to really see that big of a difference from a stock motor.
Grab one.
Got you one.
So,
Let me grab some.
Yeah, you said
swing arm.
sketch for a test, so he's never coming back.
so one of the things that I had always kind of thrown in there was, you know, when you're riding a stock bike, you tend to ride it like a stock bike and get fairly good gas mileage. When you build a big motor, you tend to be a little heavier on the throttle.
Oh, yeah.
You want to hear that
It's fun.
sound. You know,
Yeah.
you're running it out, and in which case you are not going to get better gas mileage. You know, if you're harder on the throttle, you're ripping it hard. And I think people kind of take that for granted.
I got very
We got sorry ass mile per gallon.
Does
which is
Comp Cam,
128
so they
kit.
were saying that Comp Cam has a more aggressive sound. Does Comp Cam have a kit like the SNS complete cam kits? Or
No.
I think they do
Individual
just
components.
cams, correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thoughts on
And I'm not
aluminum?
Even, and I'm not even sure if Comp Cam's going to stay in the Harley game.
Yeah. Just they do everything. So
Yeah.
the Harley's a very small part of what they do.
They're switching business strategies, though, and I don't know if Harley's going to survive.
Ownership.
Yeah. Okay, so thoughts on aluminum rear swing arm? What else?
He's got it covered.
What? Oh, look at this!
Track
Perfect
dynamics.
timing. Perfect timing.
Yeah, these things are unattainium. If you order one of these from those guys, good luck.
Track dynamics?
Yeah, we order them like 8 or 9 months before we get them in, and we just hold our breath the whole time, and then they show up. Hopefully
So
they can fix
Aaron,
that.
You get a
Aaron,
good sticker.
while he's unwrapping that,
Yeah.
what's the average cost, like labor cost, if you will? Because obviously the parts change. The labor always sticks the same. What's the average labor cost on a 124 or 128 build?
124, 128, if we're just doing the motor, is going to be right around 18, 19 hours. Add the primary to that, could be another 2 to 3,
And
depending on what we're doing.
is that full bottom end or is that just top end?
No, that's top end. That would be your cylinders, pistons, cam chest, dyno tune. And then if we're getting into the primary, depending on what we're doing in there, if we're doing a basket with the comp delete or a dark horse comp, something like that, another somewhere around 2 to 3, depending on exactly what we're doing.
Yeah. And almost always we're doing something in the primary.
Usually, I mean, if we're doing a 128,
And
we're
that's
at
with,
least,
you said with dyno time and everything.
Right.
Yeah.
if we're in the primary, we're at least doing, I mean, lately we haven't done too many other kind of clutches other than Recluse. And then the option beyond that would be whether we're going to do a billet basket or not to pair with that. And then the option beyond that would be, are we going to change the compensator? Those
Yeah.
things paired together, you're looking at, 2.5, 3 hours.
Yeah.
Buddy.
That,
That's why it takes so long to get here. They have to wrap it for 5 days.
Is that Flake AZ?
That's fine.
Fang AZ? That's about a Dynojet target tune on a stock engine. You're not, if your engine's stock, I would probably not really go through the expense of doing something like that. The target tune
Stock plus one.
and any of those auto tuning tuner setups, they're good if you don't have the ability to get the motorcycle dyno tuned. But if your bike is stock or you have somebody that can actually dyno tune the bike, I would go that route instead. And you don't really need a target tune or the Harley auto tuner or any of those setups.
I look at smiles per gallon. I like it. The Trek Dynamics, this is...
You're done.
I'm done. This is their billet one. That speaker's loud now. What happened? If you're running a chain conversion setup, it's got a slider built into the swing arm, which is something that you don't have on a stock swing arm, so that's an advantage. Plus, a lot of the swing arms we run usually have multiple locations for your rear shock. So if you are a performance guy and you want to up your suspension a little bit more, it's nice to have one where it's like a +1 or a plus, 3/4 of an inch height increase by moving it. So you can have the bike at normal ride height, then you're going somewhere where you're going to be ripping and you can change it easily. Most guys don't change it, but it's nice to have both setups depending on what shock you're running. It's a good looking swing arm. It's light. I mean, the inside of this guy, they really do a good job. And when we have Trek Dynamics make them, we've talked about this before on videos, but we take this axle and we want them to suck these guys in as close as possible so they don't hit the mufflers on most exhausts, unless you're running something really short. Getting that guy sucked in close is better. So when we call and order them, we get them with low profile nuts on the axle themselves. That way we don't have as much of a problem. But real cool setup. It's a lot of weight savings. It's not that big a deal because where the weight is on the bike, it's on the bottom. So when we had Sacha Kraus here, he's like, hey, that weight's not that bad. But
The front weight.
Yeah, there's some very cool benefits if you're pushing the bike very hard. But if you're going to chain drive, we have the slider on the swing arm right here, which is nice. You have the dual shock. Plus, it's built-in chain adjusters. These ones are really, really nice on the back there. I'm going to smack myself in the face with it. But they're nice. The bolts aren't in, the adjusters. But this guy, all you do is you buy your sprockets and chain, ready to rock and roll. So we run these on a lot of builds. We keep these in stock. If you're trying to call Trek Dynamics and get a hold of them or buy them directly through them, it's a little difficult. Those guys are busy. I'm pretty sure he's machining a bunch of other stuff in the day. We buy them in quantity, and we try to keep them in stock. So if you need one, you can call myself or Aaron. We can get one shipped out to you. It's nice. This is machine polish. Good looking swing arm. The machine polish holds up a little bit longer than a polished one. You can get them in polished, machine polish, or black. And we typically try to get the machine polished and the black ones in stock. Super cool setup. I run one on my bike. Aaron's a drag racer, so he's got a Brox on his. But a nice setup.
If you're going to run the Brock swing arm, though, be conscious what he brought up. The width here, if you try to run a full-length exhaust with a Brox, I wish you good luck.
If you're going to be running a Brox swing arm, just buy a 2-in-1 Burns exhaust and have a big high compression motor to go with it. That's the setup for that guy.
Speaking of which, somebody asked about my build. How's the build going? Running the Redshift 657. It's very much still in process. The bottom end is in it. The camshaft is in it. Cylinders and pistons are getting close to going in.
No one's touched it in 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's been so busy around here. It was on the lift for a while, and now it's kind of on the back burner again, so we're waiting.
My battery dying or something?
Yeah, I can kick you on for a minute. The receiver's dying.
You're done?
Yes, I'm done.
Is that mine?
I got you right now. It stays on for a minute or so. We're almost there anyways.
$8,000 on upgrading my 2020 Street, Bob. I spent like $8,000.
So
Yeah,
you
it's probably cool.
Got a stage
I like it.
2, 3? What is that?
3 all day long,
Yeah,
$8,000. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can do a 128 with a
128.
clutch upgrade for around that. As long as we're not doing springs on the heads and stuff with exhaust, tuner, intake, everything. SNS 465 gear drive, SC55 intake manifold, full sec, touring pipe, Vanson Hines high outputs, Thunder Max. How much am I leaving on the table by not getting the bike dyno tuned? I don't know. You could be leaving a bunch. You could be leaving a little.
You could be leaving the top end on the ground pretty soon if you don't get it
I would
tuned.
venture to say 10 or 15%.
Even though it's a closed loop system, getting it dyno tuned will definitely help it.
I mean, the throttle response is the main. I mean, that's a big pickup when we get in there and dial that thing in from the auto tune. I mean, it's a lot touchier.
Question: advantage of inverted forks on a 2020 Road Glide. We actually have a pretty good video about this.
Check out the Kraus video.
Yeah,
we went into
where we
that
go
at
into
some real
depth
length.
on this. I don't even think we're getting pretty close to 8 here, so that's a much longer video, and it explains very well. We have Sacha Kraus here, and That's a really good video to check out if you're interested in
The guy's talking
suspension.
about the Woods 777. We covered that earlier, so when this video is posted, watch it. But we like that cam. We pair it with heads. It's a good one.
And that cam likes a little bit of compression.
Johnny should have went with us. Hey, Johnny, you're going to have more bikes, man.
Yeah,
We'll
Johnny.
do your next one. Don't worry. You'll be around for a while, hopefully.
We fix
Yeah.
bad builds too, so
Yeah. When you're ready to make it better, we can just
Upgrade,
make it
yeah,
better,
That's
upgrade.
right.
Sounds like you might just have a tune issue, which we could probably work that out.
Hey, and the best way to do one is if you're in the market for a bike is to trade your bike in and finance it, unless you're paying cash. But if you're trying to finance it, the easiest way you add these accessories is with the Harley Davidson loan right when you buy the new bike. A lot of customers don't realize this, but an old bank gives you 100% or 90% of the bike value for purchase. Harley, if you have good to decent credit, they're going to give you 130 to 140. Sometimes we get 150% of the bike cost. So if you're buying let's just use an easy number of 20 grand through Harley, and they give you 140%, shoot, you're getting well over on a $20,000 bike. You're getting over 30 grand to use towards whatever you want, bike plus additional parts. So if you need that, let us know. We also have our in-house financing for builds. So if you want a $9,000 build and you have 7 grand, but you need it now because it's my power and I want it now, like you said.
my power and I want
Call
it
Aaron.
now.
He's got the setup. He sends it right to your cell phone. It's an app. Boop. You fill out your information. We get you approved, and you don't have to wait anymore.
615-771-7775.
Ask for Aaron.
That's for Aaron. Ask him to explain roller rocker ratios.
Don't press one.
yeah.
Hellbelly.
Don't press one.
Yeah, don't press one.
And if you get Jules on the phone, she's awesome. She'll take care of you. So she's on the horsepower team. She's our HP PR representative.
The
So
click bank charge for pressing one is in increments, so you might not even notice it.
Yeah.
It's
Just don't do it
fractions
more
of
than
cents.
once.
No one will ever know.
it goes to our out of work strip club DJ Roy. It's just a voice recording where he just says the same thing.
It'll last through the whole session for our headsets.
Yeah. Well, no, that's working. This one died.
Is upgrading the primary side with the Stage 2 worth it? Yeah, I mean, shoot, if you put our hydraulic primary chain tensioner on a stock bike, you would notice the difference. It's a great upgrade there. The Recluse clutch, awesome. I mean, on Stage 2, that's typically what we do. We'd run that Recluse clutch, and we'd pair it with our hydraulic tensioner.
And
Great,
if you
great
really
setup.
hammer it, maybe a basket. It's up
Price
to
on
you.
a dyno tune, right around $450. It's 4 hours of labor.
And if you don't have a Power Vision tuner, we will issue you a license. If you want the box, we can sell you the box too.
Where's Post?
Post, where's Post?
Post
Hellbelly,
working,
we see
man.
you. Post.
Where'd he go?
Can they see those bikes? They can't
There
see
he
those.
is. He's
Let me
over
see.
here.
Is he
Malone.
pulling? Are you tearing out drywall? If you guys are over there drinking my beer, you better tear out that drywall.
Yeah, there's Post Malone. Yeah.
Called 3 times and it never worked.
Show him the DJ.
Hillbilly, we're closed. You can't be calling right now.
No. He was saying he tried to call in with a comment or something.
There's our
Yeah, you
Yeah,
can just
Billy,
see
you
me
got my
fine,
number
man.
and you got
I'm
me on
over here.
Instagram, man. Knock it off.
That
Told
is
you.
Ginzilla,
Horrible to
because
look
he's
at.
7'1" and he's a ginger. That's why he looks so big on that camera. Ginzilla.
and he's a top-notch technician. We're lucky he's here.
Yeah, I'm all right.
Will we send it to Canada? A kit?
Yeah, I have a couple questions about that. Do we ship
Absolutely.
international?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we just don't ship to California.
Can't ship to California.
Country that's
Can't ship there. Nancy Pelosi said no.
yeah.
She said
But
no.
I shipped primary parts, I think, to Newfoundland
Yeah.
just last week. Shipped parts to Canada.
Australia all
We've
the
had
time.
bikes transported from Canada here, had work done and gone back. Not a problem.
Wadge, where you at, buddy?
I know, Mr. Wedge.
Yeah.
We're going to have to trade him in for 135.
Yeah.
Who's that last customer? I can see what he said, but I can't read his name.
Yeah, it's hard to see their names.
Which one?
The last one.
I think I'm a little behind.
It's
was
just F
Emer-
yeah.
You're ahead of me.
Denton. Hell yeah, buddy.
Oh, the Sasquatch.
Oh.
Sasquatch is gone.
About our last comment about California. Yeah, like your style, boss man.
Yeah.
We don't like anyone who tries to hold down bikes from being fast. That's all we care about.
I want to go fast.
Yeah. California wants to make them slow. We're just trying to make them fast.
California.
You all
Well,
tune a Honda
So
BTX with turbos and stuff? No.
Yeah,
Trade
so
in for a Harley.
What we can do is we can take that Honda and put you on a Harley.
America. America. I mean, if I was buying a side-by-side, it'd be a Honda. I own one. And I beat this shit out of it. It's got a broken taillight.
well,
We crashed it when I was over there.
Did you end up in the pond that night?
I know.
He fell.
Mike is a bad influence outside of work. Great in this building. You get him out of this building, you don't want to hang out with him. Bad times.
Oh, yeah, you do.
He's an instigator. He just wants to see how far you'll go.
so I
then he
got the
stops.
question again. And do you have any pictures of your bike on the internet, Mike? I got a bunch of people asking what your dream build is, and I know we kind of joked about it earlier.
What are you
Yeah.
riding right now?
Yeah, and I said, one of them was, what would you do with 50K, and I said, well, you just go out and look at the bagger you built,
My dream
because,
build is that little Sportster way back
yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Would it be
We've
hard
all
to walk
we've
out
all
there
been
with a
sweating
camera?
the Sportsters.
It would be. Would it be hard to walk out with one? Come on, let's go over Mike's bike. Can we take that camera with us?
Oh,
It's
no,
cable.
it's cabled.
Oh.
Yeah,
link.
you ain't getting out
Sorry,
there.
guys, we suck. Our equipment's not there yet.
Yeah. But, I
Soon.
mean, Mike's got a pretty nasty bagger built that has all the little bells and whistles and fancy stuff. on
Old
it.
short stroke,
Yeah.
right? That's the name of your bike? Short stroke?
I guess that's the name you gave it.
That's the
Hey,
name of
Chris
Mike's
Cantu.
bike.
What was that song
Chris
that
Cantu's on.
he was saying?
The what?
The gold.
Short stroke Mike on his road glide.
I'm not sure.
I can't remember. He had some rap song that was something about how I like gold.
Oh, I don't know.
That was a cool story.
They never tell me to my face.
So we got another question about the vented dipstick. Watch earlier.
Thumbs
we
up
talked
on the
about it.
dipstick, do it.
Yeah. The guy I think is with the Thunder Max and the fuel mileage is asking if his Thunder Max is okay. And now the Thunder Max itself is a decent product. There's nothing wrong with the Thunder Max, but
Yeah.
a faulty map or
Yeah, probably just
a
doesn't
bad tune or something could be
good bass
affecting
tuning.
it. Yeah, a good bass tune, and you kind of can't hear him because my mic died. But the Thunder Max is an excellent product. It still should be dyno tuned. The bass map should still be gone into dyno. Should be dyno tuned, and then if you want to run the auto tune stuff from there, it'll work a lot better than just putting a canned map in it and moving on.
Pete Larrier.
That would be a 468, sir.
Yes,
A
all day long.
508.
508. We'll,
High compression and heads are needed for that cam.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're actually
468.
building one right behind
that-
us that Posty over there was working on a minute ago.
And if
High
I remember
compression
correctly, that was a
117
pretty
with a
tricky one to
508.
tune as well.
Yeah.
That 508 was not a
It's awesome once
friendly
it's done,
cam.
but you're going to spend a little more time in the dyno. That's why we have Mike
Yeah.
and Shane and Post.
We
They
talked
dynoed
about
so many
this
bikes the
earlier.
other day, my O2 sensor in my office was going off.
So
my
twin
CO2.
cam. Twin cam stage 3.
Then we couldn't turn it off.
We'll touch on this the last thing here. We talked a lot about the Milwaukee 8, but a twin cam stage 3. You're doing. They say they're doing a 110. Actually this says stage 2, so we'll say a 13 Road Glide 107.
Boy, we're past the
Low
time.
end torque. Low end torque. What cam would you put in a stage 2 on a twin cam, like a 107?
110 inch.
For
107.
low-end torque, I'd probably, with stock
Triple
cylinders
five?
and heads, I'd probably do a wood triple two.
Woods triple 2 for a stock setup with a stage 2. Stage 2.
Yeah, stage
That's a
2,
great
triple
torque.
2 is
Yeah.
awesome cam.
That's a great torque
Okay.
for a bagger in a stock 103.
What about if you wanted an SNS cam?
I'd probably do a 551.
551. If you couldn't hear that, okay.
What about the MR?
The MR 103.
The MR 103, you could do that, but it's going to be more of a mid to high range cam. The MR 103 is a 585 foot cam, I believe. or a 570.
And we've seen some good results in that in the 110 motors.
Yeah.
Out of the MR 103, we've seen better results out of those. Well, I mean, we're at the point. If you guys want to do a little wrap up here and
Bassani or D&D?
D&D.
If
D&D.
you do the Bassani, do the Road Rage 3.
So if you couldn't hear Mike, if you're going to do Bassani, do the Road Rage 3. He said.
So I'm just gone there, huh? That's it. Fine.
We do the D&D more. But if it's a big build, that Bassani works good.
Aaron, when you go into an M8?
I'm eyeing up a lowrider S. I haven't.
Yeah.
I'm still working on my house, so I'm not ready to pull the trigger yet.
I was gonna
That'll
say.
probably be the next one.
I was gonna say you're pot committed to the twin cam right now.
Yeah, I'm in deep. I'm in deep on that twin cam right now.
And two might be onto something.
I'm on deep. I mean,
Shop in Texas.
124 kit with a 22 XE.
Can
Oh,
tune,
how
not a
much
bad
to
idea,
tune it,
buddy.
yeah.
We saw your comment.
We talked about
bad
that.
idea.
It's like $450 or $498 for a dyno tune, 4 hours. If you can get it here, we can tune it.
Chris, if they can't get you the parts, call me. I'll pack them up and I'll ship them to you.
Yeah,
Cut out the middleman, man. I'll ship them right to your house.
yeah.
The customer to tune
What's
a
up, Chris?
124 with a Thunder Max,
Poor Chris,
it's
man.
right around $450. So
Yeah.
maybe 18. Is that his name? Is it
Mr.
Mike?
Mr. Lyle.
Mr. Lyle.
Oh, Mr. Lyle. Sorry, boss man. I can't see that. That's all small letters too. Yeah, but right around $450 for everything needed.
On a 107 M8, you do not want to run a 475.
Yeah, 475.
465 or
We've covered that
475.
before.
Yeah.
475 will flick on like a light switch. at about
475
3,000
wants
RPM.
high compression. If you're going to put high compression pistons in it, it's silly not just to go,
Oh, he
bigger.
does say he runs highway 85. What are you cruising at? You cruising at $3,000 or under? 465.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
You're
limiting-
cruising at $4,000 all the time.
That's limiting yourself just to the SNS
Yeah,
cam
yeah,
sets,
yeah,
though.
that
I think there are other
475.
choices for you that might be a little bit better.
468 maybe for somebody that's on the
Exactly.
highway a lot.
468 would be good, or the fueling. That fueling 465 would be
And
great.
then I was over in the
Hey, he's back.
my battery's dead, so I can pretty
Yeah.
much say whatever I want to this thing.
Until it
yeah,
turns
so
on.
Look at
Till it
the
turns it on.
Redshift 468.
Yeah.
That may be a cam you want to look at. That's a little more mid to top
Fueling
end.
465, Redshift
Mr. Lyle, we'll see
468,
you soon, buddy.
Yeah.
SNS 465 are all great choices.
A swing arm on a build.
Like we were doing on Joe's bike.
Mr. Lyle, call me. Call me tomorrow.
Joe's
Or
bike.
if I
What
can't
does he
get to
mean,
you, I'll
like
call you as
Joe's
soon as I
bike?
can, but we'll get you set up.
Joe,
Yeah,
Jeffrey's
I was
on
gonna
that?
say, is he talking about Jeffries?
Clarify which Joe.
You know,
Hey, if you want to pay for it, I think it's good on every bike. These things are awesome. Look at this thing.
Oh, that's Denise. Oh, Joe Carbone.
Oh,
Okay. You know,
yeah,
call me tomorrow, Denise.
yeah. He said call him tomorrow.
Yeah.
My mic died again.
depends how you're riding the bike. I mean, it looks good on the bike.
Tomorrow, Denise.
Yeah. Yeah, you talk to Mike. You guys can work it out.
Is he the 135?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's our first one. Boom.
Mr. Lyle,
Mr.
call
Carbone.
me 615-771-7775. Let her know that you're Mr. Lyle,
Denise.
and I'll pick you up.
Can a 110 be ran reliably without upgrading the bottom end or clutch? You're on a 15 FXDL. Sounds like you're probably going to be beating the heck out of that thing. Clutch is probably something you may want to do. The bottom end of a 110 is fine. I mean, if you're not putting crazy lift cams and heads on it, in which case you should be upgrading the bottom end anyways. So,
All right. On that one, we're done.
yeah.
Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
If you need anything, call us to the shop. We'd love to help. Appreciate the support. And we're going to enjoy our Friday night. Fridays at the shop.
Starting with
Shove it
that.
Fridays. You know, you
Shove
got to
it
tell whoever's
Friday.
been bothering you all week to shove it. Get off your chest before you roll into the weekend. So, Mike, you can shove it. Aaron, you can shove it too. Randy, I see you smiling. Shove it. Junzilla, shove it. Tracy, you can shove it too.